You alright? Or the world around you? And normally I'm peeling the skins off of dead rats and that, but now once a week I get to come on air and talk to you about what I assume is going to be utter shite. And I've had a bit of feedback about last week's show, and I'm going to take it on board, a bit more music, and try to explain my points a bit more, because I forget that other people can't hear my thoughts and see me memories and that. So with that in mind, and taking on the advice from last week, let's start off with a song, yeah. Here's one of Classified's new songs, Pick Your Poison. There you are. Now, grab your fucking mugs, boys and girls, and you should probably throw a couple extra scoops of those beans in there, because what's the point of it being called double drop coffee if you're not going to do it? Besides, even though I've got all that advice, I imagine you're really going to need that extra energy to follow the next 50 minutes or so of this. So, getting started, what's something that you believe where you think you might be the only person in the world who believes it? And I'll get you going. I think we're slowly being introduced to the idea of aliens entering our world, but from beneath, possibly even from the sea. Even if you just use the Bible, they say that God made something that separated the waters. So what if that's just a barrier between here and Agartha? Agartha, for those that you don't know, would be the Hollow Earth. Think about it though. There's this species of creature called the krill, and I think that the krill can photosynthesize, the only animal that can, but I'm not 100% sure. But even if that's whether that's true or not, that sounds out of this world, doesn't it? Well, it gets deeper. Yeah, it gets a lot deeper. Not bioluminescent fish like anglerfish deep, but still, deep. 2% of America is allergic to shellfish. So that's at least 0.0009, that's 3 zeros, of the world's population, or just under 152 million people, are allergic to shellfish. If we liberally apply those numbers and have nothing more than a rudimentary secondary school level understanding of maths and how numbers work in general, that's enough to wipe out all of Russia. If the krill decided to wipe out anyone, they could take out the whole of Russia. Now, I'm not saying that the krill are working for someone, rather that there are some people out there who are working for the krill. Going back to religious texts, the Bible denies people the right of eating shellfish. Could this be to protect the shellfish from being discovered, or from being over-farmed so that they're not domesticated and lose their natural instinct to control the world? As a little side note, there seems to be a huge influx in population since the 1940s, which is weird considering what was going on in the world at that time. But what if the krill made their moves back then? What if that's what we were all actually fighting, all standing shoulder to shoulder, battering crustaceans left, right and centre? But because the krill won, they were able to rewrite history and create this whole narrative about World War II, when in fact the atrocities on both sides were actually by those sunlight transforming six-legged monsters, which, by the way, collectively weigh at least 370 million tonnes between them, whilst the people allergic to them only weigh 10 million tonnes. So they're outnumbered in that sense, and this can easily be considered a threat to at least those people. And just sticking with the krill's connection to the way the world is run and influenced, a huge influence on Western culture is Disney, and they released their first feature-length film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, in 1938, a couple of years before the huge rise in population began. Was this film put out so that children could be indoctrinated into the way of the shrimp? Was it put out nothing to do with shrimp? Was it just a ploy by the shrimp because they knew they were going to need more hands to work? So they made this film about this woman who's really pure. She's Snow White, very pure. She's got 7 dwarfs, which you could look at as 7 children that she's got to look after, and she's had all these kids, and she's still pure. She's still great. She's still good, but she still had 7 kids. Now, is that the reason why loads of people had kids in that time? Because of Snow White and because of Disney. There's actually loads of television and movie references to krill, which I'll get into in a minute, but it seems wrong to only mention Western culture and not Eastern culture, so let's touch on Eastern culture for a moment. There's a lot of fish eaten in the East, in the Far East anyway, and what are fish other than a shrimp's main predator? The krill want to lower the numbers of fish threatening their existence, and have been fighting a war against the krill for years. Like us lot have, the people, by dumping plastic in the oceans. The plastic floats and stops the phytoplankton from taking in sunlight. There's a good chance I'm wrong actually, about the krill. I've done a little. I don't do much research, but I thought that didn't sound right before, so I did a little bit of paused it when I had a look. And it's not actually the krill that photosynthesize. I think it's the plankton that does that. But anyway, this algae stuff. That's what the krill thrive off. They need that to eat. They need that to live. And by refracting and actually blocking the sunlight, we can stop the sunlight from hitting the algae and lessen the food source of the krill and maybe put a dent in their numbers. But in the East, they also used to eat an awful lot of whales. Whales eat literally a shitload of krill. They're perfectly evolved for eating krill. In fact, they've got them weird like toothbrush mouths, haven't they, with the massive like hair coming down for teeth. Recently, we've heard lots about recycling and stopping dumping things in the oceans by, all these nutters that are environmentally friendly and all that. But what if it's because the krill now own the media and all? Or at least they've got a huge influence over the media and what disinformation that the media chooses to spread. Well, the krill don't control me, guys. I say and do what I want on a daily basis. I'm Jack, the world around you, here at Threshold FM. Here's Kumbaya. That was Hobson, Kumbaya. You're probably thinking, thank fuck that all that shrimp talk's over. Wrong. Fucking wrong, mate. I'm on one about shrimp, and I think it's because my pet shrimp died, which sounds like a weird bit in it, but I did have a pet shrimp. He was a little bamboo shrimp, and I purposely didn't give him a name because I thought that'd make him die sooner. You know, like when you get a little budgie or a canary or some goldfish and that, and you name him. Normally, the thing that you name dies, doesn't it? Like, doesn't tend to happen with dogs and cats and that, but does tend to happen with fish. Does with me anyway. So I didn't want to give him a name, and unfortunately, he still died. He was one of the domesticated shrimp, though. He's freshwater too, so not directly and no links at all, really, to the depths of Agartha. And he was always there. He was proud of me as well. I know that my bamboo shrimp was proud that I stopped watching terrestrial TV, which is potentially controlled by the shrimp and his sort of cousins, let's say his evil cousins. And I just stuck to Netflix. So that's no news. I'm not taking in any news. There's no shrimps rotting my mind. Anyway, let's get into some of those krill references off the telly and that and off the films. Recently, the krill were a bunch of aliens in the new Captain Marvel, one of the latest Marvel films, Captain Marvel. But they've also been recurring characters in the Marvel comics since 1967. They're a militarized species moving from planet to planet, and I believe they can shapeshift, but I'm not 100% sure. Just like in The Orville, that weird sci-fi program by Seth MacFarlane, and when I say weird, I mean not funny. I don't understand if it was supposed to be funny, but from 2017, I don't know if they had a second series. I can't imagine they did. The krill were also in Doctor Who, and it's a bit of a reach, but in Dragon Ball Z, you've got Krillin, literally the name Krillin. I'm not saying that it's got Krillin, Krillin, and he starts off as an enemy to Goku, and Goku, I think, was a human, just with powers. And he quickly becomes very close to Goku, the main fighter in the cartoon. Could this be a psyops of sorts to make people think that the Krill are our friends and to eradicate the notion of the Krill being against the humans? They don't just invade your house through our TV screens, though, as well. They also invade through the postal system because they can arrive in the post, and they have been doing for decades. Years ago, you could mail order these things called sea monkeys, which are just brine shrimp. They're just the sort of things you feed to a goldfish if you've got a bit more money and you can afford something more than flake. They come as an egg in a little paper sachet, properly dried out, and they can survive for decades apparently whilst they're dried out. And they're just, what are they doing in there? They're just waiting, mate. Waiting like whatever is inside the moon is waiting for something to open it up, to hatch it, to give it the right conditions, to plant it, to fertilize it. I don't know, but they're waiting for that perfect moment, mate. Or they're still alive in the eggs and they're acting as reconnaissance when unsuspecting children dump them into the little glass bowls as well. Then they come back to life and they can send all the signals and all the things they've learned from the postal system. Imagine what you could learn from the postal system by just recording where the letters go. You would learn so much about the infrastructure of a world, of a population. Because they reach everywhere, don't they, the postal service, and maybe that's what the krill are trying to do by getting in the post. Rather than these sea monkeys simply being a way to make these measly shrimp sound cooler, could it be also a reference to the aliens that apparently interfered with ape DNA to create us, the humans? Perhaps they first messed with these aquatic apes and caused all of them to die out, meaning that they could gain control of the seas. But maybe something went wrong when they applied their otherworldly DNA to the land-dwelling apes and realised that they would need more CO2 in the atmosphere to be able to dominate the dry lands. That's why they decimate plankton populations. Phytoplankton create oxygen, which is great for fish, whales, and humans, but it's really bad for the krill. So could it be that the krill are terraforming the earth for themselves? Or perhaps the krill are actually a race of aliens that landed in the sea rather than came from beneath the crust of the earth. Maybe in the 20th century, they made breakthroughs in contacting the humans they created and distracted them with technology. Environmentally dangerous technology and all, that pumps poisonous gases into the atmosphere, like cars, vans, factories. They're all pumping out CO2, which damages plant life and increases the temperature of the earth. Now, I'm unsure why they would want it to get warmer. I'm not too sure, because that would lower the sea level. So maybe maybe they don't actually need to live in the sea. Maybe they just hide out there. Maybe they're in as a shrimp. Maybe the shrimp are like a larval form, a larval stage of the reptilian aliens, perhaps. I don't know. I'm not an expert. Maybe the warm and the planet heating up is just a byproduct. Or maybe they're not the larval form of it. Maybe the krill are just being used by another species. Perhaps the tall whites or the reptilians that supposedly lurk in the fifth dimension. Who knows? But I bet getting all those TVs into people's houses created emissions. Obviously they can use the TVs to influence people with the films and the media that's on them. The krill, they can teach people what they want people to learn and what they want people to believe and change their perceptions. They got all the emissions from the delivery lorries. So they're the delivery lorries and the boats that are bringing in all of the resources. You've got the mining of the resources, which is damaging the environment. And even the manufacturing process, mate, that's gonna damage the environment and cause harm to the humans, and that's what the krill want, innit? And imagine if they just keep making TVs bigger and bigger and bigger. Like they used to be like the size of a palm of your hand kind of thing, and now like some of them are bigger than my wingspan. Look, you've got the ones in the cinema, mate. They're massive. So just next time you're in the cinema, you look at a big screen. Think to yourself, how much has the krill paid? How much have the shrimp paid? How long did it take for the shrimp to plan this? And how many emissions have been put out by this massive TV screen here? Because they used to have them tubes in it as well. I think it was in a game I played called Trunderbrook. Don't know if it's true, but the old TVs used to have a tube that would literally give off radiation as well. So that will alter your DNA. So maybe they had to alter the DNA that the apes, the land-dwelling apes that they'd already interfered with and that had eventually evolved into humans as we know now. Maybe they also needed a little bit more radiation to give them a little bit more of a push so that they could interfere with the DNA again. I was watching Abducted in Plain Sight the other night on Netflix about this guy that abducts and manipulates a young girl by seducing both of her mum and her dad. But he convinced the girl that she was a part of a mission to save the world concerning some aliens. That she was part alien and that he was an alien. But he later tells some nuns he's in the CIA and he dumps her at a convent. I think it's well worth a watch, but it got me thinking, isn't it weird that aliens tend to come in pairs? Not your Tuscumbian space penguins or your Loveland frogmen of Ohio. They didn't come in pairs. They were in little groups. But you named aliens that have a name like, or they have a relationship where it's a pair. Like I think there was George Bush and was it J Rod or R Rod or T Rod or something. You had I want to say Roosevelt, but I could be wrong. Or Hoover. Was it Hoover that had Val Valiant Thor? The Val Valiant Thor was connected with some president anyway, and there's a pair there, and Val Valiant Thor did have a little team though, so it kind of goes against it. But you've got Enki and Enlil in the Anunnaki stories. In the Bible, you've got the angel Gabriel, who's cooking God. They're not quite coming in pairs, but they kind of come together because Gabriel came inside the Virgin Mary, and that was God's own ejaculate. So together they came together as a pair, and we're led to believe that anyway. And obviously Enki and Enlil had a bunch of other alien brethren knocking around with them to aid in the alleged molestation and raping of the newly created human race. Not too dissimilar from how Zeus used to try and fuck pretty much anything that was mortal in the stories believed by the ancient Greeks. Pairs of aliens is such a noticeable trope that the rapist fella in Abducted in Plain Sight invented a pair of aliens to aid in the molestation of the young girl. They were called Zeta and Zethra, and they were used to coerce the girl into allowing the bloke to shag her. I don't really think it mattered if she was going to allow him or not by this point, because the guy's pretty invested in it. He's bought the tape recorder, he's bought the caravan, he's got the caravan pitch, which is, everyone knows that's difficult, isn't it, to get somewhere where you can keep your caravan. And he's already gotten off with a mum, and he's gotten a quick ham shank off of a dad in the car, so it's only a matter of time at this point, really, that he's going to have his way with this little girl. In his mind, anyway, and unfortunately in reality. But the raping's not important here. I'm not focusing on the rape. I'm only focusing on the names of the aliens and the fact that there's two of them. Now, I'm not saying the aliens were real, but just like fictional aliens Kang and Kodos from The Simpsons, their names are very similar. Now, it seems pretty lazy from a creative standpoint. And are we to believe that people that made, what was it, 500 episodes of The Simpsons, maybe more, 30 series, maybe 20 episodes a series, were they lazy? Probably not at the beginning, not really towards the end, maybe in the middle. But Kang and Kodo seem pretty lazy names, but they follow the same sort of pattern as Zeta and Zethra. Very short, very snappy. They start with the same letter, sound very similar. Is there some reason behind it all? There must be a reason why he chose Zeta and Zethra, because he planned everything else. So he must have planned the names, and Kang and Kodos must have reference as well to something. Is there a pair of aliens that rule the world with two names that sound similar to each other? Uh, the rapist goes on to later. Spoiler alert, as I should say. I probably should have said this at the start. He works for the CIA, and he takes the kid to some nuns, and he dumps the kid with him. But what if this is what the CIA was actually doing at the time? What if he was actually CIA? Maybe he was dumping the kid there for the aliens and leaving him in the convent so that the nuns could tell the priests, "Oh, we've got one here who's pretty depressed. You want to come and harvest the negative energy and that?" Because we know that America's already, it's rife with, well, allegedly rife with child trafficking and molestation. But what if there's a reason, much like the idea I had that I just briefly went on there about Catholicism and a sort of, how it's a sort of organised crime, but the money's irrelevant, the money's like a cover story. Really, the priests are harvesting the negative energy from their subjects and their rape victims, like the little boys that ring the bells at the start of Mass, which is then harvested by the bishops, which is eventually fed back through a chain of command all the way up to the Pope, who then feeds or gives all of this negative energy as a tribute to the alien overlords or these extra dimensional beings that feed off of the world's negative energy that are always going to be there. Like the hyenas say at the end of the Lion King, we'll always be here. And that's something I spoke about in one of my podcasts where the hyenas were like the extra dimensional beings. Well, anyway, why would the CIA be trying to rape kids and get them used to aliens? Is it because that they, the CIA, are aliens? Is it to protect the world? Are the CIA actually at a time police or men in black that serve the Earth or protect the Earth in relevant timelines? We already know that MK Ultra was a thing, a fucking nasty thing where the Americans had raped kids and teenagers in order to cause trauma so that they could fracture their minds and rebuild their brains to create quote unquote super soldiers or otherwise brainwash people so that they can use them to manipulate society or small groups of society later on. And I don't know much about it. I know a bit, but I'd love to have a chat with someone about that. I'd love to have an interview on here with someone who has read or thinks they know a lot about MK Ultra. I don't mind if you don't actually know much at all. If you just make it all up, mate, you'll feed my mind. You'll probably feed other people's. But MK Ultra is this whole massive thing that's both terrifying to me and really interesting, because it seems like if it had happened to you, you wouldn't really know it had happened to you because you're sort of hypnotized away from it. So what if that's what happens to us all, like when we're at school or something? And have you ever thought as well, just fairly quick, nothing to do with anything, but when you're in school and you get given them bottles of milk and everyone gets given the milk and the breadsticks. Now, you get given breadsticks to make your throat dry out so you're really thirsty, so you will drink the milk to force you to drink that milk. Now, what's in the milk? Is there something in the milk? I never used to drink the milk. Doctors thought I was lactose intolerant as a kid, so I never drank it. And look at me now. I didn't drink the milk, and I've got thoughts and I've got my own ideas and that. I don't know what everyone else from school's doing. I don't know if they still carried on to drink milk. I drink milk now, but I don't drink milk that's made for kids to drink in schools. Anyway, that's a whole different thing. With the MK Ultra thing, there's loads of room for speculation too. So I think it'd be nice to have a discussion about what you think about it, what I think about it. So send us a message, mate, if you'd like to come on here and you actually know some stuff about it, and that maybe you've read a book or a pamphlet or seen a poster with it on. What if the way we perceive the church is relatively new? What if the structure in use now is relatively new as well, allowing for the harvesting of emotions like that? What if that's the reason why America is so mad into God and the idea of this all-seeing eye? Perhaps the all-seeing eye is a representation of the extra-dimensional beings being able to see us but not properly interact with us, either due to physical or metaphysical restriction. Like whatever basically stops ghosts from touching the physical realm. The pyramid could be the hierarchical structure of organised religion with the eye right at the top. But it could also be, could the pyramid not be, has anyone ever thought the pyramid could just be a sign of a prison where someone's trapped the all-seeing eye within this prison, and they can't interact with outside of this prison, but they can see out of it, and people can potentially see into it if they look for it, but they can't properly interact with it. They can only see it and perceive it. They can't actually do anything with it. Are we the eye? Now it is. Oh, I don't know how to say this, but what I'm thinking is, are they doing this? Are the church doing this to protect our home? Is it a symbiotic relationship between organised paedophilia and literal monsters? Is it all just pure conjecture? I'd like to think there's some horrible convoluted logic based in theology and science on the priests and their part for why they do it. Is it just done through the fear that they all have of these aliens, or even worse, is it all coincidental and there just happen to be loads of rapists knocking about who also happen to be blokes in like their early 30s who also just happen to be blokes that like wearing dresses, who also just happen to be blokes who like wearing dresses just on a Sunday morning, who also just happen to like ramming it up little boys' arses. It's a question. I think it's one of the questions of the age. It's not worth dwelling on, but it's a question, and you can't live your life like that, worrying about stuff like that. And if you or a loved one has been or is being molested by someone, please do something about it. I'm not taking a piss out of you, innit? I'll be taking a piss out of a paedophile every time, probably. Why not make fun of perverts? They shouldn't be protected. We should ridicule them because they're fucking kids. But you've got now to be ashamed of if you're being molested or out. Do something about it, innit? If you don't kill them, fucking don't kill them, you'll just ruin your life and then they win. But leave notes in windows, maybe in the front window or in other people's, in your car window, like some people have honk if you're horny. You could write, I'm honking because I get fiddled, and you just keep driving round, beeping the horn, or I honk because I'm fiddled. You just drive around doing that, you'll get people's attention. You'll make a bit of a dick of yourself initially, but it will bring you the help that I would imagine you would need. You could run away. You could go and tell a security guard in a shop or a librarian. Them guys never have anything to do. Neither of them. Security guards are always just standing around, and librarians are just always sitting around. So tell them, mate. A security guard would probably be happy for the little ego boost of thinking, fucking hell, someone thinks I'm, can help them, rather than thinking, oh, the only people I ever deal with are people that try to steal toasters, and they never want out to do with me. And the librarians, all they're going to do is tell people to shut up. So if you walk around the library going, me young, I've been touched by Tig Biddy Dave. Tig Biddy Dave keeps trying to grab me. The Tig Biddy's, he's always there. He's always knocking about. He's outside now in his van. You start shouting that in a library, mate, people are going to take notice. People are going to pay attention. That librarian is going to come over and tell you to shut the fuck up. Do you not know we're in a library? And then you say, no, you're not listening to a word I say. Tig Biddy Dave has been trying to grab me from his van, telling me, come and have a look at me sweets. Oh, come in here and I've got a pack of Chewits and a pack of Fruitella. What do you prefer? You can have half and half of each. Or just, if you're young, tell all of your teachers. Some of your teachers won't care. They won't give a shit because it's not worth what they're paid. They're not paid enough to really deal with that. But some of them will care about their students. Very few and far between in my experience. But you've got now to be ashamed of. They're the ones in the wrong. The teachers that don't care about the students are obviously in the wrong. But, I mean, the rapists, the molesters, they're in the wrong. Don't plan to tell someone. Just do it whenever you get the chance. Tell your neighbours. Go full on Macaulay Culkin. Write a letter. Tie it round a brick and dash it through a window like in Home Alone 2. Try to avoid the whole like real life side of Macaulay. Was it heroin that got him? I mean, I know people say that they must have had a tough paper round when someone who's reasonably young looks quite old, and I guess his Saturday job was I think working on a ranch, that very special ranch with the fairground rides, and he was getting railed up the arse by what looked like an actual fucking alien there. I'm not going to go into the whole Michael Jackson thing. That's another. I would like to go into celebrities and paedophile celebrities and have a laugh at them, take the piss out of them. But we need something a bit cheerier now, don't we? Something a bit. So here's a song that can give you some better life lessons than anything I could ever give you. This is The Manor, and this is their tune, Live for the Moment. I think it's weird that over time we've developed different alphabets. as ways of representing the same sounds. I know that Japan's got at least 3. They've got hiragana, katakana, and kanji, maybe more. And there's a couple variants on the English one, like the German one's got umlauts, the English one doesn't, like the British one doesn't. But it's still the same lettering, and they've got that weird thing for a double S that looks like a capital B, but it's been drawn by maybe a left-handed person. And there's other ones through Europe, but think about the old ones, the proper old ones, not as far back as like your hieroglyphs, but nearly. Go back to ancient Greece, their alphabet. And we've mentioned Zeus before, and that got me thinking, what if all of this with the aliens started around that time? Or at least around the time of documenting the Greek gods and the lives of the ancient Greeks. In the Greek alphabet, they don't have a C, as in the letter C. Obviously, they had the C around them. I think they were an island nation, weren't they? But or they might still be. I'm sure Greece is an island. But just the very fact that I've even had to reaffirm that it's the letter C and not the wet bit of the world tells us something, and all it's disinformation, isn't it? It's a chance for getting rid of that from them. They use gamma, the ancient Greeks. They use gamma, alpha, beta, gamma, not A, B, C or R, B, C. It's alpha, beta, gamma. So what if that was their first bit of interference with the krill, from the krill? That was the first bit of interference from the krill in the human population of the world, but apart from obviously making us first with the DNA. But perhaps the gods of old didn't pass down the letter C to the Greeks, because that could potentially mean that they could change the way they worship by doing that. By getting rid of the letter C and changing C to a G, they could make them overprotective with something other than nature itself, because people seem to used to really care about nature, and then all of a sudden, like on the flip of a switch, everyone seems to only care about gods. So how did they do that? And see, to get there, and bearing in mind with the feedback I got of explain how you got to your thoughts, I'll try and tell you how I got there. To the shrimp, I would imagine that an Arctic cod or whatever other variant of cod is a huge threat, because it would be, when it's going to eat them. And if they wanted to take over the world, the last thing they need is all the apes worshipping and protecting fish, even farming fish and making fucking more of them exist. The krill don't want that. And one of the biggest predators of the ocean-dwelling shrimp are the fish. Obviously, they're literally the biggest in whales, but so by simply eradicating the letter C, they've potentially introduced the concepts of gods. Rather than fishermen being fixated on fish like cods, they're now fixated on appeasing the gods, rather than looking for the fish of the oceans. In reality, the fish were what could once save us from the mass extinction event being brought upon us by the krill, the next great flood. Just like in the tales of Gilgamesh and Noah, why else would something flood the world if it wasn't so that they could live there? But if the shrimp do manage to flood this world like they supposedly flood the other worlds, then that'd mean the fish and the whales had survived too, and they needed to get rid of that threat. And I just want to show you how one simple change can change everything in the world. And the aliens didn't allow for the letter C, they changed it to gamma, because back then they knew that from a human point of view, only cod can save us now. And they didn't want us to know it. And it's weird to think that all these six-legged creatures, and to think about them just knocking about and making love to our women. But perhaps that's why the ancient Greeks were so welcoming of all different types of sex: group sex, gay sex, straight sex. Probably the odd animal was thrown in for a fucking and all. As a side note, I've always wondered, if I was to fuck an animal, what would it be? Not that I do, or I would, but why, and what would be my reasoning behind it? I wouldn't want to fuck a pig because they've got those proper sharp hairs, like when you're butchering them now, and they've got the really thick, hard hairs. You wouldn't want them in your thighs; it'd put you off your stroke, wouldn't it? So that'd be horrible, and that stabbing sensation in your thigh. I'm not about that. And they can't look you in the eye either when you're taking them from behind, and because they can't twist the neck all the way around because of the way the neck's developed, and they can't look up either when they're sucking you off and giving you a blowy, because a pig can't do that. Like a cow might be able to do that, or a sheep, but they're a bit big, aren't they? Like a cow's mouth is a bit big. You're gonna just feel sort of emasculated if you start putting your dick in a cow's mouth. So what would you want? What animal would you like to fuck? And not like, oh, because I think dogs are beautiful, but I want a reason, like a genuine reason. Oh, I've always thought to myself, I'd like to shag a box jellyfish because they're dangerous and I like a bit of danger. But would want to fuck something super dangerous, like a massive spider, mate, the size of a car. All them legs to work with and hold them down, or a shark, or something that'd just be a right laugh. Like a imagine fucking a spider monkey, mate, or a gibbon. Maybe that's what Jim Jones was trying to do when he was knocking about on people's houses, selling them all spider monkeys. But I can never narrow it down. I can never decide. So let me know. Find us on Twitter at World Around You and send a tweet to at World Around You. What animal you'd like to fuck given half the chance. I'm not going to judge you. Just tell me what you'd like to rattle and why. Anyway, back to shrimping orgies. Perhaps the shrimp introduced orgies to the masses of ancient Greece so that they could, 1, collect more skin suits, because they're going to need them, or the reptilians are going to need them, and 2, to not be noticed in the orgy. Who's keeping track of legs? You know, you've got 6 legs on a shrimp there. You're gunning for a very particular part of the body, and the knees, personally, have never been of interest to me. I can honestly say I've never really cared if a woman's knees even work. I don't look at knees and go, oh, they're good looking knees. Them never done it, mate. Who does? Fucking weirdos. You know, I've never looked at someone and gone, she's got a pretty face, got good boobs, but her knees don't work or they don't look like. Couldn't give a shit, mate. You know, but you know what can I say? I'm a gentleman. You know. Maybe everyone knew anyway that these massive shrimp were fucking the high society of Greece, but that's just made me realise I've assumed something about the shrimp there as well. I've assumed that the human-sized shrimp. What if they skin their farmed people and fill the skins with billions of shrimp? People were smaller back then and all, so maybe not the modern day equivalent of a dwarf height, which was supposedly 147 centimeters and below. I mean, 147 centimeters a person, fat or thin, that's a fucking lot of shrimp to fill it, innit? And I reckon you'd notice even back then, because people weren't stupid. They'd still been educated and had common sense, but we all know that a skin bag full of live shrimp and brine would be all floppy and probably be pretty dense and all, be like a waterbed, it'd be weird. The orgies could have even been some form of breeding party so that the shrimp people of the sea could create half-breeds to do their bidding for them on land. And what if these orgies were super exclusive or just few and far between? Would you really care if you're fucking a bag of shrimp, or if you're just having sex with a shrimp man or a shrimp woman? Would you care? Because it means that you're in high society and you're being included in that, so it's a status symbol, you know. Who cares, you know, if you can be with the kings and the princes and the leaders and the queens and the princesses and the highest rungs of ancient Greek society. Would you care if you're shagging a keratin sack full of saltwater and crustaceans? Because, you know, when life gives you lemons. That was Lemon by Conway the Machine and Method Man. New tune there. Also, possibly the cleanest segue of the episode. And I think we've gotten towards the end there, guys. That's got to be about an hour there and thereabouts. On a completely unrelated note, I got into the papers recently for making portable i5 machines out of disembodied rat paw. So it's a little rat's paw on a spring, and you can give an i5 that extra couple inches for COVID distancing, you know. So go and give that a look in the New York Post. Hopefully, any answers that you need from questions raised by hearing that statement would be answered in the interview that I gave with the couple that scares together, which is a podcast that you can apparently now find on YouTube, but you'll definitely find it on Spotify, Spreaker, Anchor, whatever else exists. I don't know where else you can find podcasts, but wherever you find your podcasts, go and give them a listen. Find it. It's Portals to Hell episode. I've got an interview on there. You don't have to tell them it was me that sent you, but tell them that you listen so that they know that what they're doing isn't a waste of their time. If not, fire me your questions and I'll try and answer them for you. And I'm hoping that for your sake, this show started with a bit of smoke around you, in or around you. And if not, we're definitely ending with some. Here's something to bring you down from all the stuff I've just filled your head with. Something to, ease you into the next part of your day. A little bit less sort of like padded hour and a bit more sort of now easing and relaxing. Anyway, I'm Jack, the world around you, and according to the New York Post, Britain's wackiest taxidermist, this was Pause for Thought on Threshold FM, and this is Blackberry Smoke with Run Away From It All. Immediately, the concept of the reptilian overlords comes to mind. The lions are the predator in the savannah, and also the leaders. Are they teaching us to metaphorically give our lives to the royals, or that the royals plan to eat us so long as we stay in the light? Or are they saying that the lions are the equivalent of the Palladians, and they look after us so long as we stay in the light, but if we enter the darkness and stray from our destined path, we will end up with evil tyrannical rulers?
Immediately, the film begins with what looks like a baptism, heavy Christian symbology, and it's a mandrill, an ape species that is performing the ceremony, holding up the baby to the crowd a lot like Michael Jackson did. Now, was MJ a government shill? Was Lion King readying us for him, or was MJ performing a similar technique of blessing the child? Was the child that he held up even his own, or was it a body ready to be inhabited by a reptilian? Scar talks about how some are born to be eaten and others are destined to feast, and that he answers to nobody. And Mufasa and Zazu are a representation of the Galactic Federation trying to control and speak to the reptilian who has no interest in joining their family. Scar says he is smarter, implying he is cunning. The reptilians are said to be able to shapeshift. That's a cunning trick. Zazu talks of his cousin having a mental illness, believing he is a woodpecker rather than a hornbill. Then Mufasa just walks off. This shows you that the leaders ignore mental illness and regard it as unimportant. The mandrill performs a spiritual act in the dark at the base of a boab tree. Many ancient civilizations also had tales of a tree of life, like a big, significant tree. Simba says, give orders for a hunt, chase off evil intruders when he's asked about leaders, as if that's all that leaders do. Mufasa says to him, look, Simba, everything the light touches is our kingdom, but a king's time as ruler rises and falls like the sun. One day, Simba, the sun will be set on at my time here, and will rise with you as the new king. Is this about the aliens or ethereal beings that protect this realm from the darkness? It belongs to no one, but it is for you to protect. This shows that as a leader, Mufasa doesn't feel as though he owns his subjects, whereas in the real world, our leaders act as though they own us. Everything you see exists together in a delicate balance. Don't we eat the antelope? We're all connected. A little back and forth there between Mufasa and Simba, which I thought is relevant, to what I'm talking about here. Zazu comes and tells stories or the news at the Pride Lands, and Mufasa gets Simba to pay close attention, but actually attack the bird rather than hear the news. This is showing that the powers at the top want to dismantle the news. Does this mean that the news is evil, or does it mean it's of little to no relevance to the leaders, only to the prey they are reporting on? Hyenas are hunting in the Pride Lands, and Mufasa goes to protect the Pride Lands from the hyenas. Are the hyenas an invading force? Most definitely. They're also a different species, so this shows that the leaders of the earth are fighting invaders that are of a different species to humans. Simba gets distracted by following a beetle, rather than doing what he was told to do, showing that distractions will take you off of your path. Simba was immediately off of his path and tempted by the dark, evil Scar. Simba is told about a secret, dangerous land, rotting bones, oozing mud, a lot like skeletons and lava in hell, in the dark, in the underworld. Zazu goes with Simba and Nala on their expedition to the watering hole, like an overseer would. Earlier, he was the news agency, but he is now also the all-seeing eye, whilst also being stuck on traditions, such as arranged marriages and destiny, yet he is completely disregarded, yet again. Are they trying to teach us to ignore our preset destinies, or are they trying to teach people that the kids should give up their dreams because their futures are predetermined based on their socio-economic circumstances? Song lyrics, everyone look left, everyone look right, telling people to pay attention, getting people to keep their eye on the prize, so to speak. Or is it more sinister, telling you to look everywhere except ahead of you? If you stop looking at what you're supposed to be doing, you lose track of it. Maybe Zazu or the news is there to protect the establishment, but in the busyness of the world, they lost sight of their job and the new king slipped away, unprotected and at risk. In the next scene, hyenas discuss their tactics. I distract so that everyone else can circle. This is what the aliens could be doing. The female hyena, the leader, says Mufasa doesn't control me. Zazu says that if the hyenas eat baby Simba, it'll start a war. The hyena says lions and hyenas have been at war since the beginning of time, a lot like the supposed war between light and dark, or the intergalactic war between the Dracos and the Pleiadians. The hyenas are led by a woman, and recently there's been a bigger and bigger push for equal rights for women. But also, a woman is trying to be president of the USA, so could this be a bit of propaganda saying women leaders are evil? Nicola Sturgeon, who wants Scotland to be independent and break away from what's the collective. And Angela Merkel, the leader of Germany, possibly has a lot of authority within the EU, and the EU is a collection of countries just like America is a collection of states. Does this mean that they are operating in the shadows to perform nefarious tasks like eating babies? The girl hyena also talks about ending the bloodline of Mufasa by killing Simba. There is a lot of talk of bloodlines when discussing the leaders of the world and the reptilian race, either using children's blood for fuel or putting themselves into the bodies of people in these bloodlines to take over the positions of power. Mufasa comes in and bathes the area in light and roars to protect Simba and Nala. Is this showing that the thing that protects us most from the evil entities is our five senses? Could this mean that mindfulness is a practice to strengthen our perceptions of the five senses whilst also stopping us from thinking or hearing our thoughts? Could our thoughts all be intrusive and given to us by dark beings like the hyenas? And the more we consume and interact with sensory materials, the more we can quieten the evil beings trying to trick us. Some fringe media tries to teach people that consuming in capitalism is evil, but what if it's actually a surefire way of protecting the species of Earth from tyrannical rule? Is then we'll be all feeling good all the time and not allowing the dark entities to tempt us as we'll already have everything we want. You could see the elephant graveyard as an allegory for unknown knowledge. Simba doesn't know what that place is and he wants to discover it, just like in the Garden of Eden story where Eve eats that apple to gain information she didn't already know. Or is this simply a ploy to make people prepared to never leave their towns? Or are they trying to teach children to never leave their towns? Stay where you are, keep your town going, and ignore the bigger picture. Mufasa says that even kings get scared, whilst Mufasa looks at the starry skies and says, more than you know, which shows our world leaders are scared of what's in the sky, specifically the universe. Mufasa says the kings of the past look down on us from the stars. Simba says he can't see them, and so he has to keep looking. Is this because the beings in the sky that are referred to in alien lore and allegedly in Scientology that are trying to break through our ionosphere are at the border? A lot like those demon dog things that were sent to attack Wakanda in the Avengers movie, which you need to remember is another Disney film. The hyena describes Mufasa as having good energy, like having a specific type of energy can protect you. Scar comes to the hyenas saying they've stripped the land of all of its life, as if those that live in the dark are hungry and destroy everything with a total disregard for the natural order. Scar gives a speech about how the mighty should be able to take whatever they want from the Pride Lands with no repercussions, describing Mufasa's reign as a failing regime, which seems a perfect way to get people on board with you if you want to overtake a position of power. Offer them something in return for doing all the work. So if we view Scar as the reptilian and the hyenas as the rich and powerful constrained by laws, then Scar is a great way to allow the powerful to act lawlessly and achieve their goals. Scar sells them a dream, a vision, his vision that encompasses you, the hyena, a murky scam, a coup, telling them to be prepared. You could look at this as a representation of how aspiring leaders always tell their potential populace that the times are changing. The scene finishes with Scar next to the moon, repeating, "Be prepared." Is this because there's something in the moon that's going to attack us? The moon is mostly dark, and the dark side of the moon is often seen as dangerous and mysterious. Is there something or someone plotting to rule the world from the moon? Some people believe the moon is a sort of seed bank, like the Ark from Noah's Tale, or that it's full of space Nazis just waiting to make their move. Interestingly, The Lion King had a scene that I remember when I was younger being similar to goose stepping, which was something the Nazis were known for in their marches. So is there an underlying plot here to tell us that the Nazis are in the moon? The gorge is where lions come to find their roar. Scar is again selling a dream to the young Simba. Simba wants to grow up. This shows the way that the evil entities can manipulate you through dreams and ambitions, just to further their own agenda. Is this why celebrities are supposedly used to perpetuate ideas? Turns out Scar has just thrown Simba under a bus of rampaging wildebeest, cattle-like creatures that are being used and manipulated by the hyenas. If you view Simba as one of these fabled people in the bloodlines, and then view them as a celebrity that has been sold its dream and fulfilled it, while simultaneously viewing the wildebeest as the general public being ushered down the canyon by the hyenas, or herded like sheep through a narrow path, these people would destroy the possibly self-actualized Simba. Seeing someone fulfill their dream helps other people think they can also achieve their dream. But here, Simba is being built up just to be knocked down in order to cause a sadness. A great sadness in this case. The plan is to upset Mufasa, making him weak, ending his bloodline, and giving Scar control of the Pride Lands. This happens in the real world. Artists achieve their goals, and then the media, also present in the scene as Zazu, who is looking to locate Simba, almost as if to say the media is being played off against the leaders, reports on how being successful ruined the person's life, or about how they died, almost in a ritualistic manner. Scar sends Zazu to get the pride. The media is looking in the wrong direction. Following orders from the evil entities, it is the dead tree that Simba clings to, symbolic of the environment and decaying state of the world. Scar then strikes his eyes and says, "Long live the king." Could it be that striking his eyes, it shows the leaders are blind to what's going on in regards to the coup from the aliens? Simba is then lying with Mufasa, a young boy lying with a grown man. Then Scar uses the young boy's guilt against him, almost as if it's the boy's fault. This could have ties to the child molestation accusations that seem to fly around world leaders and industry leaders. Scar then sends the evil hyenas to attack Simba. Simba is feeling bad and the hyenas will literally eat him. This is showing that the dark entities feed off of negativity such as shame, guilt and fear. The hyenas then claim they have eaten Simba, but they were nowhere near him. Coincidentally, people believe that certain entities cannot interact with the physical world, and this is a good representation of that. Scar assumes power and uses his own private militia, aka the hyenas, to keep control. Rafiki and Zazu look on. Zazu the eyes of reality, and Rafiki the eyes of the ethereal. Rafiki sees past, present, and future. Simba then wanders the desert, cast out of his own because of a tempting evil presence, like the snake in Genesis. Jesus also wandered the desert in a self-reflective state. A Timon and Pumbaa are a representation of parts of Simba's psyche. Simba talks immediately about changing the past, which is another trope being thrown around in Disney films, again in the Avengers series. What is Disney trying to get at? Timon says you can change the future by putting the past behind you, teaching you to turn your back on the world. If the world turns its back on you, turn your back on the world, is what he says. This is a way to get children used to accepting the idea of a new normal. Could this be about the New World Order? This is where Hakuna Matata is introduced to Simba. This ties into the New World Order because it's introducing a new language immediately after telling him to forget his past. It's also worth noting that Simba has just been through a traumatic event in watching his father die because of his own actions and being lied to about being saved from death from Timon and Pumbaa. This has been happening for decades. Traumatise children, then rebuild them in your image, fit for purpose. In this instance, Timon and Pumbaa are rebuilding Simba so that he can defend them and fight for them in the future. Isn't that what MK Ultra was? The Hakuna Matata song is teaching Simba to not care. They say they can live anywhere and it means there is no worries. But this is then immediately turned on its head when Simba learns that he can't eat meat whilst living with Simba, the prince, is now living alongside his subjects. Could it be that there are stories of demigods and children of gods coming to earth and living alongside people, not consuming their energy? There'd be no energy to consume because they have no worries. Is this a teaching about not caring so that you're not producing emotions to feed the visitors of Earth or the visitors of our dimension? The animals then teach Simba to eat insects. A lot of people have spoken out about how humans should turn to farming insects rather than cattle, sheep, and poultry in order to be more sustainable and to be kinder to the animals. Then a scene where Simba grows up whilst passing off a now full moon. The moon is symbolic of Simba walking into the light. He then bursts out of the foliage into the light of day as if he is now fully enlightened. Under the rule of the tyrannical Scar, the Pridelands has turned into a desolate wasteland. The hyenas are reported to be chasing off the last birds. They even then chase away Zazu, the meteor. This shows that a tyrannical ruler will attack the meteor. It also shows that the media will report on it falsely, though, as Zazu blames the hyenas for the birds flying away, when really it's Scar's doing. Scar has now perfected killing, just like how the reptilians kill us and feed off of us. Maybe the other species of aliens do it too, but in a more controlled manner. In a way that brings balance to the world. Scar is destroying their world with a complete disregard to its future, in the same way a fire just burns a forest. Scar then limits the food source of the other lions, allowing the hyenas to become stronger. Nala then sneaks out of the Pride Lands against Zazu's recommendation, or remember what the media is suggesting, but then Zazu distracts the tyrannical leader with tales of his mentally ill family member. The media will have a reprieve and work to save its original leaders. Simba seems to know something that Timon and Pumbaa do not, but you can see it the other way around. Simba knows of the circle of life from Mufasa teaching him that lions become grass that feed the antelope that the lions eat, whereas Timon and Pumbaa just see life as a line. You're alive until you die, and that's it, you're finished, it's over. Seeing everything as connected means you're restricted. You can't do whatever you want because it affects everything else. This is teaching children to stay in line and do what is expected of them. Simba wants to do nothing anymore. He has been worn down by Timon and Pumbaa's ideology of if you relax, everything will be fine. If you just survive, you will be happy because you won't care. Timon teaches Pumbaa that the stars in the sky are fireflies stuck on the blue thing, whereas Pumbaa believed they were balls of gas thousands of miles away. Simba was part of the few, the 1%, if you will, entrusted with knowledge by his father that these stars are actually the greatest dead kings of the past, looking down on the Pride Lands. Timon and Pumbaa then laugh at him as if he's mental, poking fun at him for his belief. It teaches children to laugh at ideas that they haven't heard before, to feel a sense of belonging when confronted by new ideas, but only when you're collectively turning down the concept. The dead kings are obviously actually code for protective aliens. But I can't help but wondering if it's leaning towards the idea of flat earthers, that it's just a decorated dome, or is it indicative of the simulation theory, that reality is whatever you perceive it as. Timon sees and knows it's fireflies, Pumbaa knows and sees it's the gas, and Simba knows and sees it's the dead kings. Simba releases a tuft of fur that goes down a river and then is picked up by a bird, remember the birds in the media, which gets eaten, excreted, and heads back up to Rafiki's tree, the symbolic tree of life, perhaps. The next song is The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Timon lists simple locations saying that near it, the lion sleeps tonight. If we pair this with the short Rafiki scene just before, you could see Simba as a representation of Jesus, or possibly even the return of the alien overlords that created us, saying they're just lying in waiting. We think they're gone, dead, like Rafiki thought Simba was, but Simba is still out there, just chilling out and learning. If we were being observed by something, perhaps from inside the moon, that's what that something would be doing in there, just observing the planet. Nala, now coming from the newly evil lion pride, hunts after the prey, Timon and Pumbaa, but enters a battle with Simba. This shows that there is a degree of infighting amongst the ruling class for the well-being of their subjects. Could there be a battle going on now with the quote-unquote evil and the naturally quote-unquote good, and they don't even know why they're fighting each other? Maybe they're old friends that are fighting, or siblings, kind of like Enki and Enlil, who got annoyed at each other in Sitchin's books. Maybe that war is over, and maybe they're rekindling whatever relationship they had prior to their literal or ideological separation, ready to take the fight back to the current evil overlords. Simba says he can't go back there and doesn't want to help out, so Nala leaves without his help, prolonging the misery though in the Pride Lands. Enter the spiritual mandrill, Rafiki, who wants to teach Simba who he is, or remind him of who he is at least. He tells Simba that his father is still alive and leads him away through more and more dangerously challenging branches. Then Rafiki appears in front of Simba and invites him to see, telling him to look closer and see that Mufasa's soul is inside him. Mufasa speaks from the sky, telling him to remember, repeating it. He also says he will always be watching. This ties together the earlier scene where Timon was singing The Lion Sleeps Tonight by literally saying what was seen in the earlier scene, like a delayed narration. Simba returns to carcasses and desert, repeating that he needs to fight to protect the light, and Nala is up for the fight too. Zazu returns to welcome him, showing that the media is still here, or is it showing that the media will continue no matter what, using or being used by whatever is present at the time? Timon literally then says, "Oh look, it's a puppet," which adds to the delayed narration idea I just introduced. Timon knows that Zazu is the media and that the media is the puppet of whoever's in charge. Timon and Pumbaa then sacrifice themselves to distract the hyenas. I can't help but wonder, is this why people used to sacrifice others to their gods? Rafiki gets his staff back and says, "My old friend," when he looks at it, like something has returned. Could this be a reference to magic, like magic with a K? Right, proper magic, if you will. Could it be that this story is actually playing out now? Could Prince Harry be Simba, and he is moving away so that he doesn't have to worry about the kingdom? Could we actually only be experiencing the earlier half of the film, and the second half of the film is fantasy? Scar then uses Simba's words and guilt against him, getting seemingly stronger and stronger, and Simba then falls off at a cliff, clinging on for his life. At that moment, lightning strikes a dead tree beneath him. Could this be his father, the kings of old? Maybe something in the moon setting fire to the earth below in order to reset the Pride Lands. The fire will bring rejuvenation to the lands, making it lush again, regardless of who wins the battle, making this seem like whatever he's watching has no real interest in what happens to the earth, just as long as something happens on earth. Kind of like the Truman Show, because from the moon they make the waves go mad, don't they, to try and upset Truman. Well, that's a different film. We might do that one day. Scar then gets found out after admitting he killed Mufasa. A war then happens between the hellish hyenas and the guardians of the Pride Lands. It then shows how the prey, the layman, can defeat the hyenas or the evil entities by standing up to them. Pumbaa calls them bullies and fights them after shouting he will not be made to feel ashamed. And that seems enough to fight them and make them turn away. He does charge them in the film, literally, but by saying "I will not be ashamed" and no longer being ashamed, that takes away that power from the evil. So, and Timon confirms that Pumbaa feels better by saying he's got it out of his system, almost like Pumbaa's flushed his system, meaning it's now free and his system's no longer taken over by the energy-eating monsters. Zazu, the media bird, then chases one hyena into a rock but starts to get attacked, saying, "Let's discuss this." Then Rafiki comes in and beats them with his staff, a symbol associated with magic. Scar is then chased by Simba to the top of the rock, in the sky, surrounded by fire. Scar begging for mercy, claiming the hyenas made him do it, attempting to trick Simba after he gives Scar the chance to leave and run away. Scar wants Simba to kill him, as if that's all that's needed to turn Simba away from the light and turn Simba into the dark. Scar then falls from the top into the flames and gets surrounded by the hyenas, the evil force that he just tried to betray. Scar is then devoured by the hyenas, showing the last of the negative energy has been eaten, but the hyena says their belly is never full, so they'll always be there waiting to be used, in the shadows, waiting to be accessed and given power once again. Rafiki touches Simba between his eyes, a place associated with the idea of the third eye, like it's a blessing. Also like Christianity when they bless your head. But Rafiki hasn't rubbed anything onto the head of Simba. So what if holy water, as we know it, is a form of spiritual conductor that allows the priest to harvest the energy of the churchgoers? Does the priest then take this energy and feed it to a bishop, who feeds it to a cardinal, who feeds it to the pope, who feeds all of that combined energy to the evil entities to keep them at bay? Or could it be more sinister and they feed that energy to the metaphorical hyenas as payment to keep control of the lands that they have assimilated power in, similar to how Scar allowed them to consume the Pride lands? Just learning from the mistakes by ancient leaders. Is that why history is so important to all religions? It's now raining and Simba takes his place at the top of Pride Rock whilst it's raining, which will help bring life after a fire, and Mufasa speaks from inside Simba and says, "Remember." Immediately, the Pride lands are full of life, as if all that Simba ever had to do was imagine what it was like there and it will reappear. Like the Lion Kings themselves control the perceptions of all of those around them. Could this be a reference to Rafiki's staff? Maybe his staff isn't actually to represent magic. Maybe it represents technology. Maybe by working with Rafiki and his technology, Simba is able to project the world around him, kind of like a simulation. And the cycle starts over as we're shown a new cub, possibly a new king, but probably just to allow them to remake Lion King 2. Now, if you've liked this, find the Twitter or the Facebook, search More You Know, you as in EWE, and let me know, or find the Facebook or whatever, and let us know if you want to see a different film. There'll be links everywhere you look for this. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. The next one you've got to look forward to is The Little Mermaid, which was suggested by someone who watched the original video I did in Kieran's voice, like this. And I've done that in Kieran's voice as well. And if you want to listen to it in Kieran's voice, I'll put a bit more into that, really, where he gets a bit emotional over it at times and stressed out. So if you want to listen to that, find Kieran's channel as well. I'll put links to that as well. Anyway, thanks for listening.
You're right, guys. I'm the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM. Now, I liked how last week's show felt a bit different, so this week I'm going to do something similar topic-wise. Last week was all about luck and what's lucky, and that's a little bit folklorish, so we're going to kind of stick with folklore in a way. I think it's because I wrote the Graspy Flitcher. After writing the Graspy Flitcher, I sort of took more of an interest in folklore. And if you don't know what the Graspy Flitcher is, that was my Christmas story. It's not very Christmassy, but I thought it was a nice little Christmas tale. And this might actually be the first time that I'm actually telling you that one wasn't true at all. I made it all up, which I probably should have said the week after I put that episode out, or even at the end of that episode. I just never thought to. Anyway, this week though, we're going to be looking into urban legends. So for anyone who may have suffered a recent head injury, an urban legend is something that people say to freak each other out. It's like a giant game of Chinese whispers, but that one that we've all signed up for. Now, there's a good chance that we probably have actually signed up for a weird game of Chinese whispers, though, innit? Because when you think about like terms and conditions and that, I never read them. I don't know how many fucking ones I've signed up for with EA or Apple and that, fucking, or other, social medias or whatever, other tech companies, but you don't know what you're signing up for, because I've never read them. It could be anything. And maybe what we're signing up for is to have our reality changed by the rumours set out by app developers. Anyway, get in the Threshold.fm Discord for, telling me what your favourite urban legends is. I know that some of you will probably still be in there already. I imagine I'm going to go out on a limb. This is already pre-recorded, so I can't obviously be guessing who it actually is. I'm gonna guess Jimmy's there. I'm going to guess Stin's there. Gordo might be there. Chode might be knocking about. Don't know who else will definitely be there, though. But could you, not the Discord people, but everybody else that's sending me messages to Instagram asking me, where's your Discord? How do I join your Discord? Please could you stop messaging me that? The way to get to the Discord, and the Discord I'm talking about, is the Threshold.fm Discord for the live chat. So the live show chat channel. And you can get to that through the Threshold.fm website. Anyway, all that out the way, let's have a song. This is 1970-something from the Biggie Duets album. So, where does an urban legend come from? Is there a department for world rumours where they all just, sit about and alter stories from past generations to make them relevant to the modern day? Because a lot of these stories I've been reading, they seem to be a lot like Jesus' parables, just a way of teaching important lessons without having the trauma attached to the lesson that is achieved, gained, garnered. Basically, so you can learn that bad stuff can happen without having that bad stuff happen to you. Like you get the lesson without direct experience to it, I guess. Like, for example, the story that's known of the roommate's death, where some girl nips back to her room at uni to grip a coat, but she doesn't put the light on when she runs in because she doesn't want to wake her roommate up, she said. So then when she comes back the next day, there's fucking police all around and ambulances, everything, all knocking about outside the dorm. And someone has written, "Aren't you glad you left the light off?" in the victim's blood all across the walls. Now, this implies that the killer was in the room at the same time, but it also teaches valuable lessons. Lessons like, if you're a serial killer, you don't need to frenzy kill a passerby, or, don't pay attention to other people's business if you're not a serial killer. That way you're not going to get caught up in their drama. In this instance, the drama being horrifically murdered in your own bedroom. Well, not even in your own bedroom, in a bedroom you're renting from a massive, is a university, a corporation, a massive business anyway, so you'd expect better security, basically. There's probably a lesson in there about that too. But I mean, if the girl had put the light on and paid attention to her mate, she'd probably be dead too. So it's best to just stay in your own lane, innit? Just ignore everything that's going on around you, because you never know if there's a serial killer lurking underneath your mate's bed. But because she focused on herself, she wasn't affected by the serial killer that was waiting under her mate's bed. An urban legend from America that everyone knows about, though, and like that one is one that people have heard some form of variant of it, but everybody knows this. Like I kind of take this one as fact. In America, in the sewers, it's fucking alligators, mate. Now, they believe that the alligators got there because people flush the hatchlings down the toilet, or because they get swept into there in the gutters in heavy rain. Now, this could be a way to stop kids from climbing into the sewers, because if people start going into the sewers, they'll become aware of things like the passages to the hollow earth, the doorways to Agartha, the little tunnels, the old cities beneath current cities, like how they have New York under New York in Futurama, or how in most of Japan you've got a city underneath a city. Maybe they don't want us to know about them yet. Maybe in England and that, we're not allowed to find out about our underground towns. But I'm not too sure, because we don't get told we've got alligators in the sewers. We just get told there's loads of crackheads outside and that, and you probably don't want to go outside because you don't want to get messed up by some. I found out down here apparently they call smackheads pinheads, or pinners. But there's a little bit of local trivia for you. I fucking distracted myself, mind. Fucking with the sewer stuff, like the alligators and that, like telling people there's alligators in the sewers, that would stop people from wanting to live in them as well. Because realistically, if we all realise that we could live in the sewers and we'll be fine, we're just surrounded by a bit of piss, and even then the piss is floating by, the piss is passing by, the shits are just floating by, so realistically, you're fine. And if people do work out that you can just live in the sewers, we won't need houses, because then who's buying a house if you can live in the sewers for free? And if you're in the sewers, you'll probably be dry, and you're at least protected from the wind anyway. Maybe this is what sewers are, though, in general. Maybe there's a whole world underneath us, and the big they are trying to keep us away by telling us at school that messing around with human waste is going to make you ill. Maybe there's no such thing as diseases. Maybe the Romans never existed. Maybe they made up the Romans as a way to teach people that sewers have been there for over 1,000 years. So don't go messing in them, because you'll get covered in 2,000 years worth of old poo and toilet roll. Now, we already know that that's not true, though, innit? Because in England, we get taught that we didn't have sewers until relatively recently. Otherwise, it was just people chucking buckets of shite out the bedroom window onto the fucking road beneath them. So, why are they telling us that the Romans invented sewage systems? I know you're going to be in the Discord going, actually, Jack, it was aqueducts. What the fuck are you on about? But we are told at schools, I was told at school, as far as I remember, the Romans invented the sewage systems. Now, if they're telling us that it can only be to keep us out of there, Stephen King alludes to this with his book and film series, It, where a shape-shifting demonic entity dwells inside the earth. King used a clown as a way to entice people down there in the film, but realistically, to the real world, seeing a clown in a sewer wouldn't be enticing at all. Most people would assume one of two things. They need help. Them down there, just as a clown in the sewers. Oh, bless. Or, they're a paedophile. But both reactions for that situation, they're both going to result in a phone call to the emergency services. And you're saying the same thing on the call. Police, please. And, yeah, it's some bloke dressed as a clown. Anyway, what about a few years ago, though, when all those people that were dressing up as clowns, knocking about on roads and that, chasing cars? Now, I'm not sure if I've touched on this before, because it is something I think about a lot, like where the fuck did those clowns go? But all of them, that event surrounding the mysterious clowns, they all seem pretty shady, innit, really? Because what if it was a way to just keep people inside, like a way to scare them? Or maybe just a way to test out spreading an urban legend using social media? There is a bit of me that wonders if that whole clown thing was a way for something like, I don't know, like a TV show like American Horror Story or something. Was it weird promotional actions by them? Did they just hire a load of maybe cheap actors, or maybe they were the actors from American Horror Story just running around chasing cars and that? But I really doubt it, and I've never looked into that, so I don't know if that's true, innit? I have just made that bit up there. What if all these clowns, though, what if they were shapeshifters? Because they look like clowns because they've just happened to have landed their ship next to a clown car. Maybe they're alien shapeshifters rather than interdimensional shapeshifters, and they all look like clowns because they landed the ship next to a clown car, and because 15 people came out of that Nissan Micra dressed as clowns, they thought, oh, all of this planet look like that. That's what they all look like. There's a good sample there of people. They all look like they've got, deathly white faces with big red lips, oversized noses, bright red ginger hair, and that's what all these people were. And I mean, you could argue though there with like really pale faces and bright red ginger hair that possibly then would shape-shifting aliens be more likely to exist in Scotland? But that's not really something we should be getting into because I honestly don't know. But anyway, I reckon that these shape-shifting aliens that found all these clowns, maybe they realised that it wasn't normal eventually because they were trying to interact with people, wasn't it? Just like, hello, I'm an alien, but I look like a clown because I wanted to make myself seem appealing to you. Everyone's running away screaming, and they're there with a knife like, I brought you this useful device that you all have. Apparently you all have them, but none of you know how to sharpen them. So I brought you a very sharp knife as a gift, and they're fucking chasing them down the road going, come on, I just want to give you the fucking knife, come on, give me a knife. And then obviously people got scared, so then they stopped. They were like, well, maybe people don't actually like clowns. Maybe that sample of humans that we found in the Nissan Micra were just a bunch of weirdos, and we don't want to look like weirdos. So then they just changed what they look like, and now we don't know what the shape-shifting aliens look like because they no longer look like clowns. Maybe what they do now in order to just get ignored is they just dress like fucking SJWs, like your social justice warriors. Maybe they can turn themselves into cats or whatever else would be ignored by most people if they passed them in the street. Now, not many people would want to be getting back to the fucking alligators. I mean, we've not really left the alligators in the sewers, but a bit more on them, like, you don't want to be bitten by a crocodile, do you, or an alligator, because of the fucking teeth and them neck muscles. They'll just fucking tear you to bits, mate. So, but then again, though, especially you don't want to get bit by them. Even like fucking Steve-O and that wouldn't want to get bitten by a crocodile whose teeth are covered in human excrement, shit and piss. Then if you combine all that, man, no one wants that to happen, so the risk of infection. So that makes the sewers immediately the scariest place to visit in America. Now, why is that? Why are they trying to... What's in the sewers? Why won't they let us down there? Now, I suppose you could link many conspiracies to urban legends, like, for example, bringing it up again without actually doing an episode on it, because I haven't actually got it written on my list, and I keep fucking forgetting. Phil Schneider's deep underground military bases, mate. Maybe they could easily be linked, and it could easily be an urban legend as well for what you'd need to believe that an urban legend is an urban legend. But the deep underground military bases, I guess they could easily be accessed through sewers. I mean, not according to Phil himself, but it is a possibility. What about secret underground railway tracks? That could be what's actually underground. Maybe that's what earthquakes are. Earthquakes could be acts of terrorism carried out on a secret underground railway system. But what are these underground railways, and where do they lead? Now, I know you're thinking they don't exist, but if they can make one that goes under the English Channel, which for anyone who's listening who's not from France or England, the reason why that's significant is that's a fucking sea. So that's the sea between England and France. Now it's not that big, but it's still a sea, it's deep, and they've managed to fucking build or dig a tunnel and shove fucking trains underneath there. So if they can do that, then they can definitely dig out underneath of a country and build one under there, innit? That's why subways exist in London, mate. There were rumours circulating, in 1864 of a secret hidden railway beneath London, and then, less than 2 years later, the fucking subway of London's opened. Now, this could be a coincidence. I could have made a little bit of it up. Some historians might tell you that the rumours were fuelled by the building of the subways, but what if they were just released? They released the subways because these rumours got out of hand, so they just release a few miles of track to the public and then realised there's a fucking fair bit of money to be made here if we charge people for using these that we were using for free for ourselves, whatever the big they are, whether they are shape-shifting aliens or just rich people or just, maybe the gnomes, I'm guessing, you know that gnomes, you remember from the other shows that gnomes can live underground, so maybe the gnomes use the trains. I don't know. But, I mean, what did they do with, when you think about it, man, think about it. They dug out all them fucking subways and that underground. What did they do with all the dirt, mate, all that soil? Surely they would have loads of fucking spare dirt just knocking about from digging out the tunnels and digging out the lift shafts and the staircases and that, mate. But they don't. London's a shithole, innit? But there isn't any literal dirt anywhere. And I'll be honest, the times that I have been there, I didn't even notice that many trees. Literally fucking no fields in the city centre. So where's all that soil gone? Do the trees just hold the dirt in place? And then because they've got rid of all of the trees around London, apart from maybe the odd few to try and fucking pretty it up a bit. But compared to up north and that and everywhere else around the country, barely any trees at all. So did they have to get rid of the trees? Because really the root system is what holds soil and dirt in place and keeps the dirt there. So could that mean that the dirt just drops away from the surface into the centre of the earth, leaving these gaps, mate, where they can fucking put trains? Maybe they removed the trees so that they could just fucking pretend there's more space as well. Maybe that's all how we find these hidden tunnels, because anywhere without trees could be a location of a secret subway station. Let's have another song. This is Talib Kweli with Miss Hill.
You're right, mate. Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying this, maybe you'll like my book, How to Date an Antique Table, or Lover's Guide. You can get it on Amazon for about a tenner. I don't make a lot from it, but I just hope that you'd enjoy it, innit? Anyway, follow us on all my socials, at World Around You, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, pretty much anything, mate, anything. I've even got a Patreon if you fancy chucking us a couple of quid. I'll let you get back into your show.
So, we've looked at a couple of urban legends now, but what did he need to make them into an urban legend? Some people say that they need to be believable, but that roommate story weren't really that believable, was it? Kind of scary, definitely creepy, and kind of funny, but the idea that a murderous mentalist would get caught mid-murder, then they'd waste time after they've already nearly been caught in the room. They're going to waste time collecting blood from the body of the victim to vandalise a personalised message to the fucking other roommate. It just seems a bit silly, innit? And so does crocodiles in American sewers. And to be fair, most of urban legends that I've been reading, most of them are that, they are silly, innit? Or they're just over the top weird, but still specific enough for it to be true. One good example is Sven Roygrok, which I'm probably saying wrong. And he's, you know, he's probably not a household name, not as his name actually is. But when I tell you who Sven Roygrock is, you are gonna be like, oh yeah, I recognise him. I know exactly what you're talking about. World around you, fucking yes, I thought that was true. I mean, so what I'm saying is, Sven Roygrock isn't a household name, but he is South African, and he's been in a lot of South African films apparently as of late. So maybe he's a household name in South Africa. Or, you know, maybe, you know, you might know his name because you were an active nonce in the mid-noughties. But because, obviously, you know, Sven was the kid in the Frosties advert. You know the one we mean? The one that went, they're going to be great, like that, and repeated it over and over and over again. They're going to be great, like that. Some, you know, fucking, it sounds like a fucking fever dream. Whatever, however it went. The whole advert, though, of that was overshadowed for me by the fact that the lad that rammed a couple of the lad that did it, who was in the advert, he'd rammed a couple of 2Bs up his nose and bounced it off a fucking desk, mate. Except that wasn't a fact. That wasn't factually true. It was a rumour at my school spread by the same guy whose dad had had a fight with Sarah Michelle Gellar and whose brother was mates with Richard and Judy's kid. Except at your school, that kid's dad was, you know, probably a copper, or his nan was fucking Vera Duckworth's stunt double in Coronation Street. But I bet dickhead Danny was still going on about how the kid off the Frosties advert topped himself with a couple of pencils. And what's mad is, that's a rumour that seemed to go around every school in the UK, which is fucking mental. And everyone believed it as well. Like, why would you not believe it? It's a fucking, kind of an embarrassing advert to be a part of, because it didn't really have much to do with Frosties, or, you know, any really have much to do with cereal at all. It was just odd. You know, like I say, everyone believed it, man, that's weird. And it was for a very long time that people would believe it. Like, I believed it up until I was reading of Urban Legends and it came up on my list. I was like, what the fuck? I'd taken that as fact. And what's mental about it all is there's not even a fucking flake of truth to it, mate. It's not remotely true in the slightest. Like, his dad worked at Greggs, his nan had been dead 15 years, and our Danny's brother was just some scruff that used to sell cheap lizards. So you couldn't believe dickhead Danny for anything he was saying. Not about his dad fighting Sarah Michelle Gellar. His dad wasn't a copper. Fucking, you know. But so how can you even believe what Danny's saying about Sven, about young Sven? Because Sven himself is still knocking about in sunny South Africa, making films, living off what I assume is the dream he aspired to be as a 15-year-old serial singer. Now, the rumour itself, I think this was a rumour spread around by whatever it is that slowly seems to have infiltrated our media. Because if you think about it, I'd say 2006 is around the time that television started to take a turn, at least in the UK. It was like the end of seeing happy kids on TV, or at least seeing kids on TV being like kids. Even if you bang a soap opera on now, like, you've got characters that are 13 years old, but the character is played by a 19-year-old actor, and the character itself act as if they're in their mid-30s, so that they know that they can keep that character the same through soap operas for the next 30 years without any character arc or development of the arc of the character, or whatever the fuck you would call it. You know, and the personality of the kid isn't like a kid that develops. They keep the same, don't they? Like, they give him an extreme thing happen to them in a soap opera, and then the traumatised, so that changes them, you know. Like, some of them, they seem like they've been working down a coal mine for the past 15 years, but as I say, they're supposed to be 13 in the programme, so it's fucking, like, I've always wondered why this happens, you know, and why the change in television happened as well. Because before secondary school, so for me personally, before 2005, I think TV made the world seem like it was a fun place, like somewhere you wanted to be a part of. And then it started to change, where it was like, oh, actually, you don't want to actually be a part of the world. What you want to do is hide away. Don't go outside. Outside's scary. People want to hurt you. Look at all this horrible stuff. Look at these bailiffs. Even if you stay in your house, bailiffs will be at your door. Fucking, and then the police will be at your door if you stay at your house. Everything was to try and scare you, really, from a certain point. And I can't fucking pinpoint what year that seemed to happen. But saying that, I didn't really watch much TV up until about, I'd say, like 2016 or something. 2015 was when I started to watch TV more, like actually sit and watch it rather than just watch specific programmes that I had an interest in. But anyway, I think TV, it changed, didn't it? Like the next year, so like 2006ish time, when that fucking advert came about, it seemed like it was, or it seemed like the world was fun, used to be fun, and or could be made, or it could be fun, like it all that concept, man. It's hard to put into words. I don't know how to put it into words, because how do you describe I don't know how to describe this. I'm really struggling. Basically, TV used to portray the world as fun, and then it seemed to stop. And it seemed to make it seem like it was fun to ruin the world around you, kind of thing, if that makes sense. Anyway, then, like, it fucking... Like, take the Frosties advert, like, man, because that was an example of someone trying to make a cheery advert for the telly and that, you know. And even that got jaded by it all. Around that time, they stopped putting toys in cereal boxes as well. You know, so... There was a sort of an attack on kids, and they didn't want kids to be kids. It was a weird time around then, I guess. Like, internet was becoming more mainstream as well. I think it was towards the end of the dial-up internet and all, like a transitional period, I guess. So kids losing interest in toys, and the slim PS2 taking a top spot for most Christmas lists that year. If I've got my years right, I think it was the slim PlayStation 2 around that time, because I think the PS2 had already been out for a good number of years before that. Anyway. Like, you could view this time period, as the first steps towards people shifting to a digital existence. After all, it was around 2005 that the UK government announced that tellies would be switching from analog to digital. Something that I don't understand, though, is why did they do that? Obviously they'd give us more channels, you know, but it's all the same shite on them. Literally the same programmes all the time, innit? Like, on different channels, same programmes. It's sometimes even the same episode, and an hour plus and all that. You know, I'm not knocking it, man. I've got nothing against TV and TV people and all that, and people that enjoy it, but I watch TV myself. But I do think it's strange that they took away, like, fucking local interest channels. Like, I'm guessing this wasn't around the country. Channel M. I grew up in Manchester. We had our own TV channel called Channel M. I even met the people that did it when Phil Taylor and Adrian Lewis came to do a little exhibition darts match in Wythenshawe. Fucking Channel M was there with, I think it was the fella that played Spider in Coronation Street. So it went back. I'm going back a few years. Like, I was a kid. I probably shouldn't have been in the Legion at that age anyway, but I was only drinking Coke, you know, and even a bag of crisps and that, you know, it was alright. Also, though, you know, getting back to the telly, why did he regulate what's on TV? Like, I think if some weirdo wants to sink 25 grand into a TV show that details the life and times of an aspiring sheep fucker, or some weird clip show where you're sending videos of your partner on the toilet, then why can't they? Why can't that exist? Why can't we have a PP Peepers? Do you know what I mean? Or a fucking, I don't know, toilet time or something, just like a little 20-minute episode, you know. Because realistically, what's wrong with that? It doesn't make sense to stop people from being able to do that. Because if that programme's shit, no one will watch it. Or people will watch it, then tell other people not to watch it, because, like, that's fucking disgusting. All it is fucking fat birds having a poo. Just like, the husbands go in, laugh at them. You're just listening to a bloke laugh and a woman go, no, go away, stop it. Don't you dare send this into PP Peepers. And you're like, well, of course I'm going to, because I want to get the 250 quid. Do you know what I mean? Like, why can't that exist? Because no one would watch it. Only weirdos would watch it. Nobody would tell other people that they watch it. So the programme wouldn't last. So that money's all still been spent to make the programme and to promote the programme. Everyone's being paid for it. So why can't we have shit TV shows that may or may not last very long? It just seems to have stopped. Like, Channel 4 used to be mad for that, mate. Fucking all sorts of great programmes. Obviously, they still put out some good programmes and that. I'd probably watch more Channel 4 than I do of other channels, I would say. But at the moment, anyway, especially on demand. But they've got fucking... They used to have mad stuff. And it just doesn't seem to happen anymore. It seems to be like we've missed that time. Anyway, I'm fucking, you know, I mean, kind of sort of doglegging it back to the main theme of the show. Like, if I wanted to make a show where you watch me dig holes to find hidden railways, then why can't I do that? Or a show where you go into care homes and you interview the patients that are in the care homes, you know, all the old people and that, in the retirement homes, as you might call them, in other places around the world, you know. And You know, and maybe if I want to go in there as well and film some old people tongue kissing each other, you know, just fucking see where it goes. You know, set the mood, a couple of candles, a handful of Werther's originals. You know, a glass on either side of their bed with a bit of fresh water in, so they can both take out their teeth and just plop them in the glass. No, there's the other one landing in the glass. You know, and fucking watch them go at it, and then film it, edit it down into a nice little 30 minute program. Well, it's, let's say 20, we'll call it 27 minutes. I'll give it 3 minutes adverts in the middle. I don't think many people would want to advertise during fucking late night raunchy romps. What would you call it? Retirement rompers? Raunchy retirees. I don't know. But you get like an interview of their life and that, and they're like, oh yeah, me wife died 15 years ago. I've been in here now for 10 years. And I'll tell you what, it's brilliant. Because Joan over there, she can put it right down the back of her throat. She can. She can, because she's not got any teeth, can you, Joan? And Joan's just there sort of dribbling like, yeah, I can do that. Because they're all on meds, innit, in retirement homes. They're all off their fucking faces, all shagging each other and that. That's what your nan's getting up to, or your granddad, or your uncle, or your auntie, or your mum, or your dad is getting up to in these retirement homes. Don't feel guilty about putting them there. It's a fucking orgy, mate. And we should be putting that on TV. Free entertainment for the masses. And old people will be watching it going, you know what? Retirement homes, not that bad. Should be allowed in there. So maybe all this fucking restrictions on not being allowed to make fucking a programme about the said like aspiring sheep fuckers or whatever, maybe they won't let us make these mad TV shows anymore because they don't want people to actually go into retirement homes anymore. Maybe they just want them to die at home. Maybe they want the land that the retirement homes are built on, because maybe them underneath them could be ley lines or something with fucking superpowers just emanating out the ground. Maybe like from fucking, I don't know, fucking ancient fucking water underneath, and that's why they put people there to old people on there so that they die, because it's a more concentrated amount of people that are going to die, and they're going to regularly die and pass away and feed the fucking energy source underneath these retirement homes. And then now maybe they've got enough retired people that have died above these power sources or batteries, like naturally occurring batteries in the ground that are charged from dead old people. Now, if that's the case, why shouldn't I be allowed to go in there and film them kissing each other? Give them a good send-off, you know. Fucking film that and be like, then at the end of every episode, you can have in memory of, Bill, in memory of Joan, in memory of fucking, I don't know, Stephen. I don't know old people names, innit? Agnes. Because then at the end of every episode, everyone will be watching it and be like, look at him, oh, look at that, that's funny, he's just shatting his hand and threw it up a wall, and then at the end it's like, oh, he died? Oh, bless. At least he got to be on telly though, before it happened. Anyway, fuck me, I've really got lost there. Basically though, none of that can happen because the big they say that that's inappropriate, and Ofcom would probably have something to say about it. But is that why we went digital? Were they scared of a sort of they live moment? Maybe we've experienced a they live moment already, and that's why telly is now so heavily regulated. But if that was the case, that'd mean social media is either fake or it's run by the enemy. One or the other. For those that haven't seen They Live, like on your face, because like, what are you doing listening to this sort of shite if you've never watched They Live? Shame on you, innit? Because I'll give you the gist of the film. There's people in the film, not all of them are people, some of them are aliens, and this guy finds a box of sunglasses. He can put the sunglasses on and that goes through this weird perception filter, and he can then see the aliens that are hiding as people in plain sight, blah blah blah. But basically what the point I want to get to about the film though is these aliens are using people like the rebels are using TV frequencies to get messages out to the public, but I think the TV signals are a byproduct of the cloaking devices the aliens are using to hide themselves in public. Anyway, that's the point I'm making. Watch it anyway, it's a fucking good film. Anyway, my point about TV changing is it's almost as if someone wanted to remove teenagers and children from the world, give them the responsibility of adulthood to a certain degree, but complain when they work and then complain when they don't work. So hit them with conflicting complaints to fracture their view of the world, but more importantly, make them into a young target market, a new type of customer. And that's what digital markets have done, because think about how kids now buy skins for a first-person shooter and that, and even a third-person shooter, like they're not buying that for themselves. It's just for other people to see, just like how you'd bring your Kellogg's toy to school to show off what you got or to trade your doubles. None of this has been about urban legends though, and I do apologise. I don't know what you can grab from what I've been saying. So let's have another song. This is The Turn of the Century by the Sandpaper. Another weird, hard to believe urban legend is the clown statue. At least, I now understand where creepypasta comes from. They're just drunken ghost stories, but instead of them being told around the campfire after a few cans, they're spread online after a few Prosecco's. But the clown statue itself, long story short, some babysitter bells her customers to ask if she can throw a sheet over the clown statue in the living room because it's unsettling her. To which, the customers fucking obviously reply with, take the kids next door because we don't own a clown statue, obviously. Now, I don't know what the lesson is here, other than, like, clowns don't exist, maybe, which I guess links us back to the Crazy Clowns of 2014 and the Stephen King's book, It. So maybe that clown itself was a shapeshifter, if it is a true story. Maybe it was a lamp originally, then it was like, I can become a person now because the adults aren't here. I'll be a clown. I'll be what normal people look like, because it was one of the confused ones. Maybe that's where the Majestic 12 came from. Maybe the clown that was in that room was the one that was sort of mentally broken one that they now keep in the loft, the interdimensional loft. Anyway, I thought I'd take a look at more specific stories to see what sort of weird, almost human-like interactions there are out there in the literal fucking reams of urban legends. One of them is called The Smiling Man, a story about a bloke walking around noting a person with a face that looked a little off proportion. The head was leaning back, chin pointing up to the sky, and the face itself is smiling. Big smile though, not like a cheeky smirk, a big fucking shit eater. So I think it's weird when people smile around me at the best of times, especially as I walk past them in the street. I always worry that I'm fucking Truman from the Truman Show when people do that, to be honest. Other times I freak out though, thinking that there's some form of that they're all some form of creature that's just trying to fit in. But I mean, maybe I've just lived down south too long, and like people don't really smile at each other down here, at strangers and that. So maybe it's just I know that that's unusual now when people do that down here. Anyway, this smiling man was able to move around rapid, almost instantly, almost as if it wasn't real. But what if it was real? But not a physical thing. What if it was like a shape-shifting creature or a fourth-dimensional creature trying to blend in? It's possible, unlikely, I guess, but still possible. I guess there is a chance that they may have been walking past a person with physical disabilities and then further down the road they happen to walk past their identical brothers, like all three of them, but I really doubt it. Odds are the whole thing is a lie. But could it be a weird way of teaching kids not to trust openly happy people? Because I don't trust openly happy people. Can't help but think they're all liars. No one's happy all the time, innit? I'm not. None of me family are. Me missus isn't happy all the time. A smile for no reason is definitely, I would say, someone hiding something. Now, if you happen to be at work whilst you're listening to this, or if you sat in class while you're listening to this, first off, if you sat in class and listening to this, you're a fucking legend, mate. And I hope that's made you smile, because you've got one over on your teachers here, innit? You're missing out on vital information for the rest of your life. So maybe, you might end up like me one day. You'll be sat in a cupboard underneath your neighbour's stairs recording radio shows for Threshold FM that, people aren't going to take seriously. If you're in work, fucking good on you as well, because you're getting paid to fucking listen to me prattle off shite. But anyway, do us a favour, look around the room or the bus or the public bathroom that you're waiting in and look for the smiler. Then recognise that feeling in your belly as you look at them. Unfortunately, I'm not very good at I can describe the sensations, but I don't actually know what's assigned to them sensations, I guess. Like emotion-wise, that's not even a bit. I'm not very good at that. I can only describe the actual sensation to you. So you're gonna look at that smiley person, and I want you to notice that little pinching sensation at the top of your belly, just underneath your rib cage. Now you know why you feel that way, don't you? Now you know. Now they make you uncomfortable, mate. That person smiling, that makes you uncomfy, and now you know why. They're either being beaten at home or on the way home or otherwise being bullied in their home life. They're not actually happy or happier than you. No one's happy. That's why when someone's all friendly, you need to be careful, because, what are they after? Are they after your bumhole? Are they after your house keys, card details? Maybe they're a child molester. We may never know. But what about the fella in the window? Another urban legend, I don't mean stare at the fella in the window. If you do look around the room and there is a fella stood either in your window or staring through your window, then definitely fucking bell the police, or, their carer, because something's going on here. But the story of the urban legend of the fella in the window, a woman bells the police because she sees a man in the window. Then she hides under a bedsheet till the police arrive. Don't know how they got through the front door, but they did. Then the police say that they found wet footprints in her room facing the window, so the guy was inside the house all along. Could this be another subtle reference to demons or ethereal beings? Maybe we shouldn't be scared of other people outside of ourselves, but be terrified of what's going on inside our own metaphorical homes or ourselves, our own business. Again, maybe, though, you should be scared of what the people are doing in your house. You're not constantly with your siblings or with your parents, are you? So how do you know that your brother and sister or auntie and uncle or whoever it is that lives with you, how do you know that they're not plotting to kill you? Or how do you know that your family aren't secretly a domestic terrorist cell? Speaking of domestic terrorists, what about Mothman? Fucking Mothman's a good urban legend. I think he will get his own episode because it's kind of a cool story, and there's being more things about him all around the world as well, rather than just in fucking Point Pleasant. So that makes him more interesting. But he was said to fucking be around and fuck me, I can't remember the year. But he knocked about anyway around an old TNT mine, like a fucking explosives mine, which, risky place. People would still be drawn to the mine, though, like a fucking mothman to a candle, even though they fucking knew it was a dangerous place and it's got fucking literal explosives in there. Yet, then when they find out that there's a giant fucking moth humanoid flying about chasing cars, they go, oh, we'll avoid that mine. There's a fucking Mothman there. Not, we could get blown up at any moment by the fucking dynamite in the ground. But the idea that there's a fucking 9-10 foot Mothman creature that flies after cars, that's enough to keep them in a safer lifestyle, Sometimes, though, it seems like these urban legends might kind of be made by committee. And it's best for that committee to be stupid in order for it to be clever. Oh, the committee sat around and fucking in the Vicar of Dibley, and they're like, oh, bombs don't scare them. And then the weird guy's just like, what about a moth? A massive moth that predicts natural disasters. No one will want to be near him. And weirdly enough, he was right. The weirdo was right. It kind of worked. Let's have another song. This is I Used to Be by GOH, Sugar Star, Redman and Method Man.
Cheeky little advert about halfway through, Did you know that I've got a Redbubble and all that, where you can buy yourself little stickers for your laptop or your skateboard or something, or shirts as well. Even if you felt, especially weird, you could get a shower curtain with my face on it about 150 times. Obviously, I know no one wants that, but you got to have something different to offer, haven't you, that other people haven't got. Anyway, let's crack on with the show.
What if the Mothman was a drone and the TNT mines were actually drone factories? The place was called Point Pleasant, and you could argue that a drone is a modern-day equivalent of taking point in a battle. I reckon, you lead with the drone. Maybe the Pleasant part of the name is a sort of sarcastic name that they give to the military base that's there. I don't know if there actually is one, though. And it seems there's a crossover between what is now called a creepypasta and an urban legend. One of the most obvious crossovers of this would be Slenderman, a story that involves a Photoshop battle to rival the one that we learnt about in the episode about the Giants, purely though because this battle resulted in death. 2 12-year-old girls killed their mate because of Slenderman. Horrible story, fucking shouldn't have happened, but it did. And it's another example of how fiction affects the real world. A story literally made up was the blame for the death, but I haven't looked into it much, and I reckon we'll add Slenderman to the list and cover it another time. I don't know what the hidden message of Slenderman would be either, because I don't know a lot about him. I only know bits. Maybe it's a deep-rooted message that says you shouldn't allow children to use the internet because, they don't have the perception to decipher fact from fiction. There's a good chance, though, that Slenderman is actually a tulpa, and if you don't know what a tulpa is, then you can never actually be affected by one. But now I'm going to ruin that for you, because knowing a tulpa exists mean that you can make one exist, and you can even make that tulpa stronger. Freddy Krueger, he's a good example of what everyone will know. In the films, he gets stronger the more people are aware of his name. The idea behind a tulpa, though, is that if people believe in an idea, then the universe has a way of bringing that idea into reality. Just like how for years no one believed Tupac was dead, and then his ghost rose from his grave and performed at Coachella. But because people didn't want the knowledge of tulpas getting into everyone's world, the big they called it a hologram. like we're living in fucking Star Wars or something. And speaking of ghosts, I read about a quarter of a scientific study into urban legends, and from there I was mostly just Googling what words meant, and I wasn't really learning anything from it because I kept having to break it off to find out what the different fucking words meant. Anyway, they said that most people that believe in urban legends already have a predisposition to believing in conspiracy theories, ghosts and the paranormal. And that's pretty interesting, I thought. But that also made me wonder, though, do gossipers get included in that? So when Brenda from the corner shop is chatting shit about Carl across the road, could she just be as easily telling you about the boy who kept getting internet pop-ups until he was killed by an unknown entity in his bedroom that painted his walls with his blood? The original story, supposedly, of the Red Room. Or maybe she'll be whittering on about the fucking Wold Newton Triangle. I would love to go to a shop though and I've be told fucking mad conspiracies by this so-called Brenda. Especially the stories from fucking Wold Newton Triangle. I mean, that might get an episode on its own. It's a fucking mental place in East Yorkshire that's home to fucking werewolves, ghosts, vampires, fairies, and even a fucking mysterious monolith and a dragon, mate. Some people think that all these stories stem from the placement of ley lines in the area, whilst throughout history, they've always blamed the local stream, which is known as the Gypsy Race Stream. Locals have always believed that if the stream itself swells, it's a sign of an incoming disaster in the area, which makes perfect sense because I would imagine the stream runs downhill because it's a stream. So a swollen stream would probably be an indicator of heavy rainfall further uphill. So maybe the regular disasters would be a flood of some description. Anyway, the dragon's a pretty sick story though. From what I could read about that, it's supposed to still be there in the sea at the minute. A place that's called Filey Brig. The big rocks that are on the coastline of Filey Brig are supposed to be the calcified bones of the dragon, which itself was tricked into eating this really sticky food by the locals, and then whilst it was washing its teeth in the water, they drowned the fucking thing. But that was ages ago, so it's not really relevant to an urban legend, it's more of a myth. But there's still ghost stories emanating from the area. One of them that I read, that ghost supposedly only exists because a group of sisters refused to decapitate their dead sister, which was her dying wish. She wanted to be decapitated and have her head stored at the grounds of the building. And obviously, because they didn't do that, the dead sister haunts that building until they did dig up her skull and returned it to the building. And then, surprisingly, all the hauntings and the weird sounds all stopped and never returned. Werewolves and all, like I say, in the 1700s, there was a building erected to protect people from the local wolves on Saxton Hill. But there was also stories about werewolves in the area. Many people believed the wolves were too smart for their own good in that place, so that these wolves must have been humans that had been inflicted with lycanthropy. The most recent werewolf sighting, though, is from the past 100 years, mate. Comes from the 1960s, where a bus driver claims to have seen a werewolf just fucking knocking about, mate. Now, it's hard to believe all these things because there's so much going on, and it seems unusual, but what if the monolith I mentioned? What if it's because of that? Maybe that's the cause of all of these monsters. There are countless stories from olden days to now claiming that the monolith came about because it's a missile from the devil himself launched at the world, and that would explain all the mad stuff going on there. But I mean, what if the missile was, or the missile, is it missile or missile? Missile was actually from an alien spacecraft. It could easily be a missile, but what if it's one of Xenu's soul prisons? And because they miss lava, they can creep out slowly, or they can't properly escape the prison, and they inhibit them whatever's nearest to them. Maybe that were wolves or dogs at the time, or maybe it's a fucking form of calcified, unexploded interplanetary missile from a fight between aliens. But honestly speaking, I can't really find out much about that. Could the monoliths of 2020 have been a group of people trying to recreate these conditions? Or maybe they were trying to have an excuse to use holograms in the area to make people scared of ghosts, werewolves and other monsters, almost as if they're trying to recreate conditions from a few hundred years ago, trying to instill fear. Because realistically, fear will be the best way for religion to make a comeback. Anyway, that's about all I've got time for this week. I'll see yous in a bit. Don't know if I'm going to be able to fit the whole song in, but we're going to finish with this. This is Push by Pharaoh Munch. I'll see yous in a bit. Alright guys, I'm the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM. Fucking risky territory this week, innit? Because we're going to be taking a deep dive, like a literal deep dive as well, into the Pacific Ocean as we pat around on the dark sea floor for traces of ancient lemur and prove once and for all that Lemuria is in fact a real place. Now, I don't know what's happening with me at the minute, but I seem to be getting sort of sucked towards theosophy a lot recently, like Helena Blavatsky and all that, and I've not actually read any of her stuff and that, but I'm finding all of that side of the world very interesting. All that sort of stuff is fucking fascinating, so maybe it's going to turn into something. Maybe this will be part of a series. I don't know. I've not really planned out for next week. I had a show planned for this week, but I haven't had the time to. It's going to involve listening to about 300 songs to try and find the hidden message in them all. So that's going to be a challenge. That's going to be one I'm going to have to work on for a few weeks, I think, 'cause I've only got through about, I think, 70 of the songs, and so far haven't really found the hidden message. But like I say, this week it's all about Lemuria or Lemuria. I'm gonna go probably for Lemuria, even though it's spelled Lemuria, but Lemuria, a lost continent that's been swallowed up by the Indian Ocean. So made a mistake a minute ago straight off the bat when I said we're going to take a deep dive into the Pacific Ocean. We're actually taking a dive into the Indian Ocean. Anyway, we've already messed up, so let's have a song. We'll get straight into this. This is off Shotty Aura's brand new EP, The Teller, and it's called Dave's Dilemma. I think it's a tune, mate. It was a hard one to research, this Lemuria, because there's around 100 years where literally no one figuratively touches it. No one has touched it, literally mine, for around 34 million years, give or take a few 100,000 years either way, but that's even if it did exist at all. Now, the fella that brought it into the forefront was this guy called Philip Sclater, which I'm probably going to say wrong because I want to say Scalter, but it's definitely Sclater, in 1864, you see. Now, this man seemingly was obsessed with lemurs as well. Like, that's the whole reason Lemuria has its name, literally deriving it from lemurs, as Lemuria was said to be the land bridge that connected Madagascar and India, finally explaining to long-standing mystery seekers, if you like, the people that were not experimenting but researching evolution, basically. It would hopefully explain to them how lemurs were in India and on Madagascar, despite there being a massive fucking puddle in the middle. Now, the reason people were obsessed with this is because the lemurs seem to have evolved separately, as many creatures of Madagascar seem to have done. Like, you've got them ones that look like little hedgehogs, but in fact they're just mice with spines, you know. Yeah, they share genetic information anyway, so it's probably worth saying that evolution was making its rounds at the time, and science was beginning to be swept up with it. Science, or at least modern science, was warming to the ideas of evolution, but people love a good story, so I think one of the best ways to look at it is the 1800s always sort of seems to me like the sort of tween years of the modern human race, so you're like sort of 11 and 12, maybe 10 and a half, you know. We've not quite hit the aggressive teenage years of the first half of the 20th century, but, you know, we're on our way. We're arguing back with the teacher and we're making fun of the camp kid in the class, but we're not quite fingering girls or fighting with our friends' dads quite yet. We're not there yet, but, you know, humanity's on its way. Weirdly, though, these teenage years of modern history, 1912 to be exact, is the moment when Lemuria went under in scientific terms, at least not when it sank, but when it sort of disappeared from the general, I think zeitgeist is the wrong word. What's the word I mean? The general mind of science, the scientific mind or whatever, you know, it fucking, people disregard it anyway. All because of some bloke that was called Alfred Wegener, and his theory of continental drift. Now, he came up with the just as wild assumption, as wild as Lemuria existing, I would say possibly wilder, really, that continents move around, which, if you take it at face value, seems just as weird as the idea of a continent being sank underneath a sea or an ocean. Now, what I don't understand is that there aren't many people who dispute the idea of a big flood. It's backed up in historical texts, albeit religious historical texts, but also mainstream science, as scientists believe that when ice gets warm, it melts. My science teacher at school would also regularly tell us that magic doesn't exist, and that something has to go somewhere. It can't just be nowhere, it can be anywhere, but it can't not be there. Things don't just disappear. So, this water, where did that come from? Because it doesn't make sense to me that there was just ice present on the earth for millennia, then suddenly it started to melt. But according to some stuff I've been reading, that is entirely possible. They believe it took billions of years for the Earth to tilt on its axis, and that this alone could be responsible for the water escaping its icy prison. But what caused that Earth to tilt? Well, not that Earth. What caused our Earth to tilt? What if the water and the tilt came to be at the same time? What if the planet doesn't tilt at all? Because I don't understand how a ball can be said to tilt if it's in place with no up or down to begin with. Like, where's up in space? Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's most likely just a lie that we tell ourselves in order to answer the questions of children so that adults don't seem stupid in the kids' eyes. Because realistically, as soon as kids realise that barely any adult actually has an answer to anything in the world, like, throws at them, like, adults know nothing. I'm an adult and I don't know much at all, as you can tell by the first first 10 minutes of this. I know fuck all. But as soon as kids realise that that's everyone across the board, mate, we're fucked. It's all over. Maybe it's our duty as adults to lie to the children. I've never been one to tell lies, though. I don't think that kids appreciate it. I won't tell my kids, if I do have kids, I'm not going to tell them about Father Christmas. I'm not going to tell them about the Easter Bunny. I'm also not going to tell them about the time that the mother was pretty. Just facts. I'm only ever going to give the kid facts. I bought you gifts. I bought the chocolate. Your mother was never pretty. Do you think she'd let me do the things that we do together if she knew that she was a looker? Always shoot 'em down, lad. Aim low. Go for the ugly girls. There's two types of people in a relationship, lad. The lover and the loved. Always strive to be the loved. No one wants the ugly, sweaty girl at school. Now, see, lad, that's your opening. Don't lead with that, though, lad. Lie to the woman. Tell her she's beautiful. Make her feel nice. And that's how I treat this show, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing but the truth. So, who were the inhabitants of this long-lost land? The Lemurians, which isn't hard to believe because, we've got Europeans, we've got Africans, we've got Americans, we've got Asians. So why not have the Lemurians as well? Perfectly logical. Now, the Lemurians were also supposed to be the ancestors of not only the lemur, but of the human race too. Having been knocking about approximately 34.5 million years ago, at the same time it's noted there's velociraptors and the brachiosaurus, hard to imagine how we survived at all, really, innit? Until you pay attention to the fact and you remember that our ancestors, the Lemurians, had 4 arms each, and each one of them stood at least 15 feet tall, like a fucking oversized Goro from fucking Mortal Kombat. But a time period isn't the only things our ancestors shared with the dinosaurs of that time. The first 3 so-called sub-races of the Lemurians. Sub-races is a thing that I think I'll explain what that is in a little bit. It's not like a derogatory term. It's just what theosophical people, theologians, maybe. I've heard the word theologians before. Maybe that's what it means. But it's not a derogatory term or anything. I'll just get into it in a bit. It gets a little bit puzzle. That'll probably be an episode all on its own. Anyway, the first 3 sub-races of Lemurians, they were also oviparous. Oviparous. There's a lot of words this week, guys. A lot of words with a lot of vowels, and my accent don't really allow for it. Either way, that word means that they laid eggs to reproduce. Now, I'm not sure if the Lemurians were like Godzilla in the sense that they could fertilise their own eggs, or if they needed to make love like an octopus or your fucking average donkey. There doesn't seem to be much record of any of this. There's no drawings, there's no pictures, there's no etchings, there's no recreations, there's not even any short stories telling us how the Lemurians made love to each other. Like, was it a passionate affair? Was it a violent affair? Was everyone into it? Was it more of a chore? Was it they had one Lemurian that would breed amongst loads of female Lemurians? Or was it, the other way round for whatever reason? That doesn't really... I mean, maybe the strongest sperm would survive, but it seems counterproductive to have, 15 men breed with one woman because she's only going to get... Unless maybe they could hatch out batches of eggs, maybe. Fuck knows. I honestly don't know. Like I say, I couldn't find any videos or pictures or anything like that to learn from. But this kind of ties some stuff together. Like, from a religious standpoint, there are or there were, a species of giants known as the Nephilim, a giant race of humanoid. And there's also indications of giants from ancient Egypt too. And if you remember back to the giant episode, there were giants all around the world at one point or another. So, what if the giants, modern humans, and the water that covers Lemuria can all be connected? What if an asteroid or a spaceship frozen in a piece of ice hit the Earth one day, right? And then with such a force that the Earth tilted on its axis, the ice melted away because it's now leaning ever so closer to the sun. But what if the moon is simply just that, you know, that when you see a picture of when you see someone's photograph or illustration of a spaceship, spaceships always have that little ball in the middle, innit, right? So what if the moon is simply that middle ball of a spaceship? Like, you know the bit of mean, innit, where you always see the little grey man waving or whatever, and inside there is the DNA splicing facility or a laboratory, a laboratory that we've alluded to in the past in other episodes. We keep bringing it up. Maybe it's true, but there's more. There's a lot more. So my theory, and that's that's. I say there's a lot more. That's all realistically in my imagination, and not actually the theory of Philip Sclatter. We've actually learned less than what I'd intended to. All I've done is muddy the waters. Anyway, we'll get back into what we know. So the 4 arms and 15-foot tall humanoids seem to stem from an idea from Helena Blavatsky. Now, like I said at the start of the show, I want to learn more about her and the stuff that she put out into the world, because there's fucking seems to be loads of it, and it seems to have influenced so much of modern society realistically without anybody even seeming to know who she is and what she's influenced. It's mad. It's proper interesting. But in all honesty, I think to learn her teachings and everything that she wrote about, realistically that should be a paid job. Now, this isn't me being a shill. I'm not saying, fucking wing me a fiver and I'll read a book. I mean, like, that's gonna take somebody years. Like, there should be someone getting paid to research into all that side of stuff and spread it to the masses. But no fossils have ever been found, though. You've got to bear in mind that these Lemurians, the giant 4-armed men of Lemuria, because unfortunately all of the fossils are underwater. And experts say that as soon as we dig down, down there at the bottom of the ocean, the hole just gets fucking backfilled with water, which could explain why we rarely find any evidence of things hidden underneath a seabed. Anyway, let's have a song. This is What's Golden by Jurassic 5. If you're listening to this and you think to yourself, quite like this, maybe you'd like to see what I make out of dead rats as well, mate. There's a link below in the description. Wherever you're listening to this, you should find a link anyway, a link tree. If not, just search World Around You, the name of the podcast, and you'll find all me on all my socials and that, mate. Give a little go of threshold.fm as well. You'll find loads of different radio shows there by loads of different people. Anyway, thanks for listening, man. I'll let you get back to your show. Lemurian, though, they didn't get plucked out of the ether, though, like the Polarians. Like, the Polarians were kind of just plucked out of the ether. In fact, they kind of were the ether. They were an ethereal being. They were the first root race, according to Theosophy. So, the species, as I say, was an ethereal being. So, what if they're still knocking about, though, and they're the real interdimensional species that are interacting with us and interacting with our world? Because if they've had since the Earth was like a fucking, what do you describe, like a primordial soup, I think would be the most poetic way to describe it, then surely they'll have evolved, and if they already had no corporeal form, no physical form, maybe they've evolved to move through, like, time and space, because if they've not got a physical entity, then surely they can move around, but maybe the way that they are is physical to them. Maybe it's just in a different spectrum. I don't know. Words are escaping me this week. I'm not gonna lie, guys. This one was a fucking, like, I spent a day researching this, and I'm not gonna bullshit you. There's not a lot out there. But what if the Polarians, right? Maybe these are where souls, or our souls at least, come from. But maybe something happened to time itself, and now there are the souls of this species, of the Polarians, knocking about, and now there's also our souls, and they're trying to live side by side because maybe something happened to time or something happened to the timeline, and they are like living with us, as far as I'm aware from what I'm reading. Like, they are doing to a degree. But what if Ike says, like, what if like David Icke, one of the things he says about the invisible reptilians that are holding onto our spines, if any of that is remotely true, then maybe we are just a way for the ethereal entities to experience time and space again, to try and get back to what they knew. Maybe they're not evil at all, just in the same way that a PlayStation controller or a Nintendo Switch pad or a fucking Xbox controller, I'm sure other games consoles are available, but just in the same way that them controllers aren't evil, like just if you only had that controller and didn't have a PlayStation and a PlayStation game, it'd be pointless. Like, we'd never be able to do much with it, or vice versa. If you only had the disc and the console and not the controller to use, you could maybe observe a very, very small window of what's available on that disc, but you wouldn't be able to interact with the rest of the disc. So maybe we're just the controllers for them, or maybe in a weird turn of a twist of fate, maybe we're controlling them, but we're not aware. Maybe there's something about us that has been evolved to, in order to suck them into us, so that, and then they're stuck in there, and then we can use them to interact with time and space, to maybe fix time and space, to separate all of these different so-called root races of theosophy again, so they'd separate them back throughout time. I'm not sure. Anyway, we'll get back to Lemuria. As a concept, it went out of fashion for about 101 years. Well, it was 101 years. And then in 1912, continental drift came cruising over the horizon, innit? But in 2013, someone discovered an element called Xiron. Again, another weird word. It's an element, so it could be pronounced as anything. I recently watched the programme, and I saw that there was a French guy. Could have sworn he was called Arnold. He was called something like Clan. Proper threw me. Unless they made a problem with the captions, with the subtitles. Fuck knows. But anyway, that's completely off topic. Great programme though. It's called Surviving Death. Definitely worth a watch. But we'll get back into Xiron. Now, they found this Xiron in a place that had supposedly, this place had only been accessible and existed, so-called, for a few million years. But from what I've read about Xiron, that takes billions of years to form, so the timings were off. Somehow, this means scientists can say that there is a missing continent there, in that area, and this continent, right, that continent there is Lemuria. It's pretty much Lemuria. They've just given it a new name. They've called it Mauritia. Mauritia. Now, there have been other underwater continents discovered and all, like Zealandia, and there was one called, again, forgive my pronunciation, a hell of a lot of vowels, Kerguelen. 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 Kerguelen Plateau. Now, these probably have their own mythologies too, but I haven't actually looked into any of that, because I was just sort of trying to be laser focused, on Lemuria. Another continent, though, that gets thrown around in these sort of ancient continental circles, if you want to call it that. I don't think anyone else does, but we will. The other continent is called Gondwana, or Gondwana. It could be, the W could be a V. I'll spell that one. Fuck it, I've spelled the rest. Gondwana. The idea, right, was that there's this supercontinent that everything was connected to that broke up because of the tectonic plate movements. But tectonic plate movements, right, that takes millions of years, if not billions of years, to be noticed. Like, you can't just constantly feel it moving, otherwise we'd all be going insane, wouldn't we? Like, just constantly shivering. Like, like we're on a fucking one of them vibrating platforms they have in some of them expensive shops. Like in I remember them having one in Selfridges as a kid. Used to try and stand on it and go barefoot on it, see if it'd hurt your feet. Never really did. It's just a vibrating plate. Not interesting though either, that. Not interesting to anybody. Wasn't even interesting to me at the time. I was just making the most of hanging around with people that I don't think actually liked me or wanted to hang around with me. So I just entertained myself whilst in the company of others. Bit personal there, guys, Throw us an F in the chat or something on Discord, fuck knows. Either way, let's getting back to me notes. So the tectonic plates, right, they would take billions, a very long time to move, but by having that as the cause for these continents moving and disappearing, that almost completely removes the threat of an immediate and unavoidable danger. In my opinion, that's all science is about, innit? That's all science is. Science is about answering questions. And a lot of the time, once an answer has been found, it seems like people who question it are then looked down on because we've then built the rest of science from that original fleck of so-called science. Like it's constantly builds on itself. It eats itself, doesn't it? Like I think the word I've learnt the word recently. I did think it was another word, but I think I keep seeing it getting thrown around on the internet all the time. Ouroboros, like fucking that snake that fucking chews its own tail, man. Like that's what science is, isn't it? But what if science is just an art form, and it's like in the same way that marketing is an art form, and it's or propaganda, you know, it's a way of making people complacent, unafraid because of science. Now, they feel that they understand it all, everything that there is to be understood, they think people understand. No one likes the unknown, and that's why people don't like the dark, innit? Saying that, though, I mean, I guess if that was true, if everybody in the world was afraid of the unknown and the dark, then people wouldn't use glory holes, would they? So maybe I'm wrong, but you know, when you see the videos of glory holes, it's always so well lit up, so they're not scared of the dark, but there is the unknown there. So again, you know, I might be wrong, but making people believe anyway that the world as we knew it was destroyed slowly over time, rather than by some cataclysmic event that could strike at any given moment. Like, you know, whilst you're sleeping tonight, maybe a meteorite could crash down at your kid's birthday party next week. A zombie could rise out of the ground, a zombie dinosaur skeleton could rise out of the ground, and then that causes radiation to leak, or because we found a bone underground that's heavily radiated from the meteorite, that just spreads radiation and kills everyone in days. Or whilst you're balls deep in your girlfriend, or even while you're with a sister, you know, a fire could engulf the world. You just don't know, like from solar flare activity or something, or one of them, like the fucking Carrington event could happen again from the 1800s. You know, that's got to be due again, one of them solar flares, and that could set off all the fucking missiles, mate. The nuclear bombs could go off because of the fucking electrical mishap, like a little naturally occurring EMP. And all of a sudden everything gets fried, and it just takes one missile to go up, and there'll always be one part of the world that survives, and they're like, oh, well, fuck that guy, press the button, blow them up, and then, you know, it goes, you know what I mean? Like, it's maybe that could happen, you know, and but people don't think about that, do they? You know, because there's no telling when a meteorite could strike realistically, and there's no way of telling when the next great flood will be. But think about it. If continental drift could happen, wouldn't the gaps between the continents give space for the water to shift into? Because why would the water suddenly flood the world? And why are nearly all the other planets that we're aware of dry? Like, the water's got to have come from elsewhere. Otherwise, there'd just be ever increasing and decreasing gaps between islands. Like, when they're in, like, fucking people are swimming the Channel Tunnel, swimming the English Channel. You wouldn't swim the tunnel, but if you swam the channel, that wouldn't be something you could hold as a record, because that would be constantly changing. I mean, it does with the tides anyway. Maybe that's all tides are. Maybe we're told, you know, the tide comes in and out, but really what's happening there is the islands are constantly moving back and forth. What if it's the continent, the islands themselves that move, and the sea stays still? Maybe that's why we've put the moon in the sky. We learnt that if we put the moon there, it holds all the water in place, which kind of protects the islands and just gets rid of a bit of the sand on the edge of the countries, you know, on the borders. And then as the islands move back and forth, because obviously, you know, islands float in it, everyone knows that, like a bit of, like with them plastic islands, you know, that's where islands are formed, all the plastic bottles from thousands and millions of years ago, then dirt gathers on them like space dust, and then life crops up, a bit of moss, you know, a fish lands on there and that gets eaten by a bird, but the bird gets its foot trapped in there, so a sea lion comes and eats the seagull, and then a killer whale comes and lands on there and eats the sea lion, and then that killer whale's trapped now on that island of mossy plastic bottles. And then that slowly evolves over time to become a 15-foot Lemurian, perhaps. But like, getting back to science, I guess. If these gaps were real, I'm not disputing the sea's not real. I'm not saying that water's not real, but maybe the tides aren't real, and that's why they're moving. That we're told that they're moving, so that we perceive it's just a tide coming back and forth. But really, we're getting like a few centimeters away, further and further away from France. But maybe the Earth's also like the universe, where everything's constantly moving away from the center of the Earth. So everyone's staying. It's kind of proportionally, if you looked at it on a map over time or a satellite, it looks the same distance apart because everything's moved at once, possibly. But then again, if the islands did split with continental drift, the continents did, and it was a valley, then suppose the water would fill that valley up. But then that would just mean that beaches would become lower in other parts of the world. But we're being told that sea levels are rising. It's a paradox, guys. So what if it's all about the wording, though? Like, seas themselves can be landlocked. So what if those levels are rising because when the rain falls and fills the seas, the sea rises, right? But really, the oceans are dropping because the water's either being funneled under the plates through some form of like naturally occurring hose pipe, and that's why beaches can look so long. Or maybe like the ocean water evaporates, like we're told at school, and rains down into the mountains and the seas, and that fills the seas up and empties the oceans until them seas then grow to become a fucking the seas grow into an ocean, and then before we know it, we've no longer got like the Dead Sea. It's then the Dead Ocean and the Red Ocean. They'd probably, I think they're quite close to each other, so they'd be the Dead Red Ocean, Dead Red Ocean. I don't know. There's got to be something there. Someone will have something for that. But and then the oceans shrink, so it becomes the Pacific Sea and the North Atlantic Sea, because we got loads more beach then, and we can sell sheds and deck chairs, and the whole new cottage industries arise from that. I mean, obviously this is all in the air, all hypothetical at the moment. Like we may never know. Anyway, let's have another song. I assume we'll all know this one. This is Fandango by DJ Quick. So, after Phil named Lemuria, it wasn't for a few years till everyone became aware of it, and this seems like a test for later in the human timeline, because they took a then scientific finding, modern day pseudoscience as we would call it, and then they spread it to the masses. So I was thinking, was this propaganda, a way of changing science, a way to take the power away from the uneducated, or was it simply just a chain of unrelated events leading to it? Either way, in 1870, again, another fucking hard name, Ernst Haeckt, which is spelled Haeckt, Ernst Haeckt, claimed that Lemuria was the ancestral home of humans. A claim that I imagine was an ironic greenie in the face for the then Pope. Ironic because his name is Haeckt, but and not just for the Pope though, but for many other religious leaders, like because the Catholics had spent fucking years trying to eradicate the ideas of old religions and the old philosophies and understandings of human history, and now suddenly one bloke is responsible for everybody hearing that instead of being made by God in a walled-off garden somewhere, we instead evolved from a very advanced form of primitive being with 6 limbs, because this was science, and as far as I'm aware, science had always been used to disprove folklore, magic, and the supernatural. So, was or is theosophy? Was theosophy, and if it's still being thought of today, is that the way that very intelligent people could use science to break down the invisible cage that's been constructed around us by scientists and their science? Just as a little something to chew on in your mind for you there. But can we use science to dismantle this new science? Because, as I said a minute ago, the zircon discovered was 3 billion years old, and Mauritius is believed to have disappeared 84 million years ago. But lemurs were discovered to have evolved in Madagascar 54 million years ago, so the maths doesn't work. Now, maths is supposed to be the universal language, but who's told us that? Fucking scientists, mate. They've made their own language to describe their own stories, to further indoctrinate their own people. But that brings us to the here's how. Now, let's have a song, bit of a dark one, I'm not going to lie. This is Constance by Mr. J. Madero. Now, I want to talk about the Lemurian egg layers for a minute. I was wondering if they sit on them like a chicken does, or whether they bury them like a turtle would. Then, I remembered about echidnas. Now, they're this mammal that lays eggs, sweats milk, and has a pouch. And it turns out that they carry their little leathery eggs inside of their pouch. So, I wonder if the Lemurian used to carry their eggs. Because I'm assuming both of them are mammals. But we've got creatures now. An echidna is a mammal, and I'm assuming the Lemurians were also a mammal because mammals seem to have stemmed from them, be it lemurs and humans. But at the minute, we've got creatures now, like the aforementioned chickens, that are birds, but their ancestors were reptiles. So maybe the Lemurians weren't actually mammals to start with, but let's presume they were. What if that's where marsupials come from? Maybe the extra arms the Lemurians had were mostly used to cradle their egg, keeping it safe from ground-dwelling predators and keeping it at body temperature by holding it close to its chest. So maybe after millions of years, these creatures put a lot of their evolutionary stock into growing a pouch to hold their eggs in, and having survived for millions of years through 7 stages of so-called subspecies with 4 arms, but only ever using 2 at a time for activities. Then maybe it makes sense for them to lose their other arms. Maybe when you've got 4 arms, you'll have your 2 dominant hands. Like when you've got 2 hands, you've got 1 dominant hand. You know what I mean? So maybe, for example, like the upper left and lower right, leaving the other 2 hands that they've got only good for egg holding. Just like in humans, how, as I say, you've got that dominant right hand. Now, I know that when I type on a keyboard, for example, just to, illustrate my point, when I type on a keyboard, I'll use like 4 fingers on my right hand and probably only the middle finger of my left hand for maybe the ED and the S key. I'll probably even slide over to the A key, and sometimes I'll use my little, what would be the ring finger, the finger next to your pinky on your left hand. Might even use that for the shift button, but never at the same time. Now, I can't even really, a bit too much information quite possibly, but I can't even really wipe my arse without it feeling like I've somehow missed my target with my left hand, or, you don't want to do, because then you're just worried about smearing shit up the inside of your arse crack rather than simply rubbing it away or rubbing it back into your bumhole. Anyway, marsupials are mainly found in Australasia, which is also where these echidnas are found. So what evidence is there that exists out there that Lemurian people ended up in Australasia? You'll be surprised to find out that there is actually some evidence of that. Now, if you read about the root races, which I mentioned earlier on, which I'll try and summarise quickly. Again, they're the 7 races of past and present creatures that seem to have made up and will make up history, as according to Theosophy. Risky territory now, because we're talking about races and that, but I will go into these in another episode when I've got a better understanding of them. But Helena Blavatsky suggested there are these 5 races and that there's going to be another 2. The next one's not going to show itself until the 28th century, and others have suggested that these peoples will inhabit a land called Bensalem, Bensalem, Salem like the witches, Ben like the name. And I've only scratched the tip of the iceberg with this, as I say, with these though, and honestly, I'd never heard of these root races until today. But interestingly, the list suggests that the Lemurians left Lemuria due to volcanic eruptions and colonised various parts of the world, like the East Indies. But one of these races are categorised as, possibly categorised as a problematic name, maybe. And if for some reason this is offensive, it's not intended to be, this is literally what they were called. They're the Australoid race. Australoid. But this implies that this race lived in Australasia. And from a quick skim read of it, as I say, I'm saving it for another week, I think they did live there. So what if these 6-armed Lemurians evolved to become kangaroos? Because kangaroos are thought to have 5 limbs because of the strength of the tail and the manner in which that they use the tail to run. And they also birth the young into a pouch. So maybe a kangaroo, they only lost 1 arm through evolution. And kangaroos get pretty big as well, innit? Like, I know Helena Blavatsky said that Lemurians are the ancestors of the humans, but I fear she also means spiritual ancestor, as in our souls came from the Lemurians, much in the same way that they believe the leader of the 28th century people will be inhabited by the soul of the very long since dead Julius Caesar. Plus, it's widely accepted that dinosaurs became the modern day chickens amongst billions of other species that didn't quite make it to today. So maybe these four-armed humanoids were outsmarted or killed for their meat, because being 15 foot tall would probably mean there's a lot of food on there, innit? But I guess over the millions of years, due to the chemicals that have been constantly changing in our air, the trees have shrunk, and so have the animals, so maybe that's why they shrunk down to the size of a regular kangaroo. But some people don't even believe in dinosaurs, mate. Instead, they claim that it's modern scientists and their way of hiding the fact that giants inhabited the earth before us. And if you don't want people to know that there was once four-armed, 15-foot humans, then the best way to sort that out would be to rearrange their skeletons into a fucking T-Rex, mate, because that's still pretty big. I mean, I think they're bigger than 15 foot tall, and that's because they've used pretty much like fucking 3 arms, the equivalent of 3 arms, to add height to it, or to add the tail. Like a T-Rex's arms are kind of half the length of a Lemurian's arm, in my imagination at least, because they're just little stumpy things, aren't they? So that's an extra half of an arm. They've got the 2 spare arms and then half of each arm to shorten the arms down. And the, added into, you get them, and then you could add it into the tail, the spine, into the rib cage, or you could just simply use it to extend the legs through. And those extra finger bones as well, they could easily make up some extra teeth. Like they make, use the little bones to chop them in half and make them look like molars, and really fuck up the science world of dinosaurs. It's just a thought, innit? But it does kind of, to me, it makes sense. I don't know how you used to feel about it. Now, I think it's weird how when I have researched this, I have to decide at the beginning of this one really what I'm going to believe, because otherwise it makes the research almost impossible. Because if you go into this was one of them topics where if you go into it really open-minded, then you're just going to be running around in circles, because it's impossible to believe the science, the history, the ancient history, the YouTube conspiracy theorists, and also to believe the alternative history timeline. So you've got to kind of take one of them as gospel for this and then run with it with the research. So that's why I think everyone can get a completely different point of view on this. I kind of took the mantle of let's not believe science for this one, and it kind of allows the others to fit in place. Whereas if you was to say let's not believe history, then you can believe science, you could possibly believe ancient history, you could maybe believe the YouTube conspiracy theories, but you can't. But they disprove everything. Everything basically just disproves everything else with this one. So it's very, very weird. But you get what I mean. Like you don't want to. The whole episode this week would have just been me arguing with myself with completely opposing points, and I don't think anyone wants to hear that, do they? Like, who wants to just hear me rattling off to myself and getting like wound up with it all? And I couldn't. I even from my notes, when I made my notes, I couldn't do it, mate. I couldn't fucking put it together. And I honestly, guys, I don't know what I believe about this, because I don't know if I think there are millions of Machamp fossils buried beneath the Indian Ocean. I do believe continents have disappeared, because we can see erosion ruining coastal towns right now, right this very second. You could go to a coastal town and watch sand or rocks drop off the edge every couple hours. So it makes sense in a way. Continental drift, to me, feels like a way of stopping people from being scared at the end of the world, because I think if everyone realised that if a meteorite could hit us at any moment, or if the sun could go out, or the earth could simply explode, or the poles could shift, or even the moon could run out of fuel and smash into the side of the earth, or just simply is finally refueled from the sun, and it just flies away. If people could realise all of this was possible at any given moment, then I don't think people would really go to work anymore. Society would fall apart, innit? And the 1800s and 1900s, from my understanding of it at least, their best export, that time period's best export to the future, feels like society. Like, maybe not the way they had society, but the concept of society seems to have come around in those times. And maybe that we have the eradication of folklore and and the non-uniform beliefs to thank for that. Maybe that's where society can come from eradicating the ideas of different people, kind of thing. We're like, no, don't believe that. Everyone needs to believe this. And another point, though, before we end, that I should make is that makes me disbelieve science as we know it. It's one of the reasons why scientists don't believe in Lemuria, and it's because I read that scientists believe that lemurs evolved on Madagascar around 54 million years ago, right? After initially swimming to the island from mainland Africa. And that seems like you're a kid, you're in the car and you're looking round and you look up at the sky and you're about 4 or 5 and you're like, Dad, why is the sky blue? And he gives you some bullshit answer. He doesn't know why, but he knows that if he doesn't give you an answer, then you're going to start to doubt everything he says. And you're too young to be doubting what he says. So how can we be sure that science isn't simply just a religion? A heavily disguised religion with its own prophets and laws? I guess we can't, but the stories of Lemuria kind of have a crossover with the Indian stories of Kumari Kandam. Maybe less of a crossover and more of it being picked up by certain scholars and then having the information from it being assigned to references from their history to make it seem like it had been around for longer, possibly. I'm in no way an expert though, but from reading what I have, it seems Lemuria came about in the late 1800s, and then over the next 150 years it was adapted all around the world to fit various stories and nations. Now, you know who does have an interest in making the whole world believe one story though? The Illuminati, the Enlightened, the New World Order. And you know what else they're into in a fucking big way, mate? Triangles. They love a triangle. It's the strongest shape there is, and that's what shape Lemuria or Mauritius was said to be. So why would a triangular continent get washed away? Maybe a triangle is strong if it's in an artificial structure or in a societal or hierarchical structure, but in nature, I can't think of that many strong triangles. The Bermuda Triangle, to be fair, is pretty strong. That can fucking just delete things out of existence. But and the Wold-Newton Triangle, that was pretty interesting. Not that strong, but interesting. Definitely, But like I said, I don't know if they're that strong. Carrots are kind of triangular, but they're only strong in one direction. And I'm not trying to show off, guys, but even I can snap a carrot. So what if the New World Order was trying to indoctrinate the world to the idea of a triangle being the cradle of civilization, so that it'd be easier to believe in a triangle that claims to be the future of civilization? Because I'm no historian, as you're bound to be aware, but wasn't England heavily influencing that part of the world where Lemuria was said to be up until around like the mid-1900s, and maybe even to this day? Maybe I'm just ignorant, but and from the mid-1800s to mid-1900s, this story of Lemuria seemed to thrive, and the way it was used to facilitate what seems like a totally new legend in the late 1800s all around the world seems a little bit suspect, really. But maybe that's just what happens. Maybe good ideas tend to all happen at a similar time because the cultural and scientific happenings lead equally intelligent people to make the same conclusions. Anyway, that's it from me. I'll see you in a bit.
Yeah, I don't. This is Pause for Thought with the world around you on Threshold FM. And just before we get into it, I had a thought when I woke up this morning. See, now my missus hates when I wake up in the morning with a question, so I'll just ask you guys. If taxonomy has to be specific, as in, I assume it has to be, otherwise what's the point in the classification system for species if things aren't extremely precise, But anyway, with this in mind, when did humans really ever exist? If all the specific characteristics of a human were decided, say, back in Darwin's day, then surely the human race has slightly evolved or, mutated since then. And that means that we'd no longer be humans as such. So what would you call us? What are we? Is that why, anyway, though, there could be so much talk of bloodlines in alternative history and conspiracy law? Because, I know the Germans were big into it with their monarchy and that's why our monarchy has German blood in it. Like, that's a bloodline that goes through Europe, so it's bizarre anyway. But though you could apply it to anything, it doesn't have to be to humans. Like when does a toucan stop being a toucan? At what point of coloration change does a one type of parrot become another?
when it changes a shape, when the African grey parrot becomes a dark African grey parrot, does that make it a different species of African grey parrot? You know, there's all sorts. Anyway, we're never gonna get an answer to that because I haven't looked into that. There was just a question, it's an hard show to start off. I'll be dead honest with you guys, and it's completely by the by anyway. You know, because this week I'm gonna be thinking all about gnomes, mate. Now, if you're like me, you like short women, and a gnome is a lot shorter than a small woman, so it might be hard to objectify or sexualise a gnome. May sound a little perverse because size-wise, I think we're looking at around 2 foot at most. This is just before any research, you know. And when you remember that these gnomes are always in waterproof Macs and they've got disproportionate fashion and accessories, most of the time it's easy to forget that they're actually miniature elderly people that real-sized elderly people enjoy collecting. Is a gnome collection a warning that you've hit middle age? Is it part of a granny's fantasy to have lots of small people in the garden facing a bedroom window to see her untuck her tits from a waistband? Well, according to one woman, that's the exact reason. And she's here today. Obviously not. I still haven't managed to get any interviews. When you speak to people and say, would you like to be interviewed for this? They say no. But, anyway, where am I going to find a granny from anyway? Like, all mine are dead. What am I supposed to do to find a grandma? Just fucking go and pluck one out of the ground. But, to be fair, you could pluck a gnome out of the ground. A species of mythological creature said to dwell under the surface of the earth with over 500 years of written records of them, starting with what's widely accepted as the first mention of the word gnome. And now that's in a book by a Swiss bloke known by the name of Paracelsus. In his book about so-called elementals, you know what elementals sound like though? When you read about them, they sound like interdimensional beings, and after a bit of a read, he even refers to them as the demons of Christianity, which many believe to be associated with the jinn, which many people assign to being interdimensional beings. Now, though he doesn't view them as evil like religions do, he just assumed they were part of God's creation, and I think it's pretty interesting that he was able to hold Christian views and still form his own opinion on the creatures, because that seems to be where a lot of people fall down, innit, when they start looking into this sort of stuff. They start trying to explain why God made this due to the science, or why science can prove God wrong. This guy, this Swiss bloke, he just sort of let both run concurrently in his mind, which is, I think, a good indicator of intelligence. Or he could have just been fucking doolally. The creatures, or elementals in question, are divided into the 4 groups known as nymphs, pygmies, sylphs, and of course salamanders. They represent between and water, earth, air and fire respectively. I think it's weird how language has evolved to use these words to describe other things. Historically, nymphs were an ancient goddess of sorts, and nowadays it's a word assigned to a woman who likes to put it about a bit. Pygmies are still a version of small human as they were in this book, but Aristotle believed that there was a land south of Egypt that was home to all of the pygmies and their race of proportionate horses, which is weird that they would have horses that were proportionate to them as well, almost like it was a different reality almost completely, you know. But what if it's true? What if we're the pygmies? Because there's tales of giants and there's tales of pygmies, but what if there isn't a middle ground? What if we're the pygmies, or we're the giants? Maybe we or nature eradicated the giants or pygmies, but either way it was believed that these pygmies lived underground, you know, much like a gnome, and nothing at all like the pygmies of today, especially seeing as they were only ever thought to have an average height of around 5 inches, with 6 inches being seen as especially tall, which is weird because that's also is assigned to our penises, isn't it really? Like 5 inches is supposed to be average, with 6 inches being seen as above average. Now it's only slightly above average, but it's still above average, and I'm taking that, But my point is here, I guess. You could argue, what if the stories of gnomes are actually just the story of a penis? Like, because you could have an uncircumcised penis, and that could look like it's got an hat like a gnome's hat, and it's got pubes on it as well, which would look like hair, you know, like a gnome's got hair on it. So what if there was a species of something that before humans, before we took over, before the aliens spliced our DNA with the ape-like DNA here, what if they didn't have genitals, or what if it was more like a dog's genitals, where it was retractable, you know, like a noise as it shoots in and as it shoots back out again? You don't know, dear. It could be. Anyway, that's just a quick aside there. I mean, this makes me think, though, getting back to the, you know, pygmies in now. I mean, if you take the dick talk away, this makes me think that we are the pygmies. We are very much in the earthly plane of existence. And if you swap inches for feet, then we're the same. 6 foot's considered tall in humans as we know it, but what if it's all being altered by the giants or some other form of meddling race to stop us knowing that we can get out from this underground prison? I know a few weeks ago I suggested that the darkness of space could be hair, but what if it's soil? Maybe the blue of the daylight is caused by all the chemical reactions that occur from the roots transferring chemicals from the ground into the root, rather than just because of the chemical reactions happening in the sky. I think it's much more believable, isn't it, really, to think that the blue is the blue in the sky, purely down to the chemical reactions taking place from the roots from the plants we can't see because the soil obscures our vision. That just makes more sense than the blues in the sky. Well, the sky's blue because it's blue because of a reaction. Doesn't give you enough, does it? But I suppose all of that though would make for the starlight being, that would mean it would be the refracted light passing through the stems of the plants. But that's just a thought before we properly get into the gnomes, you know. Just a quick dig about, looking for gnomes. A quick look into gnomes though, and you learn that they're believed to be able to pass through solid matter, like a ghost or like a fish can through water. What if this is why there are tales of rock faces that are actually doorways that lead to empty rooms? Now inside these empty rooms, I'm saying empty rooms, they're near enough empty rooms, but supposedly there's these doorways you can pass through in mountains where you go through it and then you can see these black diamonds, and inside those black diamonds are the universes, like our universes and other universes, and it's just inside some form of laboratory, according to people that give talks on the internet anyway. I remember listening to some talks by a lady called Linda Moulton, and I'm sure she detailed a lot of cases of people attempting to find these doorways and attempting to change their frequency, as I think she called it. And I think she said it was possible through research and meditation at the spots where these doorways are supposed to appear, that you can go through them if you follow these steps. Going back to them changing the words to hide the truth though, they used to assign salamanders the fire ability, but what about dragons, you know, believed by many to be able to breathe fire? Though I think it's more likely that they had the ability to shoot a type of venom of sorts. Being from a massive creature, surely the effects of such venom or stomach acid would be catastrophic to whatever it hit, except for maybe some form of massive mongoose. I guess because like mongoose or mongoose. You know, a mongoose would fight a cobra and possibly win. Imagine if that's what dogs actually are, mate. A derivative of the giant mongoose or mongoose that protected us from the giant sulphur-spitting flying salamanders, gifted to us by the aliens who created us or altered our DNA. What if aliens don't exist? What if they're actually the equivalent of elves from Tolkien's stories? There was supposed to be many races of elves, and gnomes was just one of these elven races, according to Tolkien lore. Now, I'm not saying Tolkien's stories are true, but they are very detailed, and either Tolkien was a severely mentally ill man, or he had some form of idea about something. And although all of Tolkien's knowledge of gnomes, giants, trolls and supernatural beings could have been a curse, it was believed by those that followed the stories of Ymir in the Nordic times that dwarves and elves could cause mental illness amongst humans. What if that's what truly causes mental illness though? It's almost immediately more believable than it being caused by naturally occurring defects that are all becoming more apparent and debilitating to the populations all around the world. I always think you have to question something, innit? If you're constantly being told about it, like every day, constantly, every TV show, every news report, everything is always telling you about something. You got to question it, haven't you? Like, why would they keep saying that unless it's not true and they just need you to believe it? And it's what's been pushed on us over the past few years, isn't it? Like adverts, films, TV shows, and What if it's all misinformation? Seeing as these beings are supposed to be supernatural, maybe there's an element of belief needed in them for them to be able to take effect. But maybe you don't need to believe that the gnomes are gnome. Maybe you just have to believe that the gnome... Well, maybe you just have to believe in the effects the gnome can have. I don't know. Like I said before, guys, I'm not a scientist, innit? I can only find what I can find and then tell yous. Yous have to put it together yourselves, I guess. Whereas, the powers that be, they probably don't want people to know that they could be cured of their ailments by appeasing these supernatural beings, like leaving a tribute under a tree or something. Maybe that's why there's big corporations in existence that cater for a lot of the pharmaceutical industry and for the media. Maybe these corporations have a lot of crossover, why wouldn't they? Maybe it all ties into my thoughts about Catholicism, about priests harvesting naturally occurring bad energy to give it to a bishop, who in turn gives it to a cardinal, who gives it to the Pope, who feeds this energy into the abyss, or the doorway, leaves it at the doorway of these ethereal beings, or some form of payment to a certain realm or a different mythological being or an interdimensional being or an alien. It could be anything, couldn't it? Perhaps that's why we stockpile gold, though. Like, at this point, I'm assuming that we all know the Anunnaki wanted gold. Well, that's a given now, isn't it? But we've gone into that enough briefly for you to know that's something. But what if it's collected by people like the American federal government and it's gifted to a race of supernatural beings? So you could have the Catholics giving negative energy, people's guilt, remorse, shame. Catholics love a bit of shame. Giving that to this ethereal being, the jinn or whatever. They lap that up like the fucking hyenas in The Lion King. But then you could have people like the federal American government. They collect gold, don't they? And are they gifting that to a race of supernatural beings? After all, it's one of the most conductive elements that we're aware of, so maybe these supernatural beings want to create some weaponry from it, or their godly technologies. But if everyone knew that they could offer gold or their bad energy directly to these interdimensional beings, it'd be chaos, because everyone would have powers, wouldn't they? Everyone would have power over people, or money, or whatever they wanted. The wishes had come true because they were doing what the supernatural beings wanted them to do. So if you release a film, say in the 1930s, all about 7 dwarfs, this could start to change people's opinions of the supernatural beings. And it gets weirder though, because the first garden gnomes, as they're called, seem to have appeared around the 1930s and all. Almost like the two were tied together. The stories of dwarfs and gnomes have a lot of ties to Germany and Germanic-speaking countries, and where it gets super weird is that another thing that ties all of these things together, well, a couple of things really that tie all these things together, but sort of the same opposite ends of the same bow almost, let's imagine. Disney and the Nazis, basically. Disney released Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs whilst they allegedly held the Nazis' hands at times. Now, I can make this make a little bit more sense. On the left hand of Hitler were Michael the Mouse, whilst on the right hand was the Christians. The Pope was in bed with Hitler, probably literally, because we all know what priests are like, so why wouldn't the super mecha priest want to fuck Hitler? I won't put it past him. It's possible, but, it's not based in fact, like the rest of the show. Whereas the campaign of the Christianity to destroy culture around the world is well documented, isn't it? There are people that believe that gnomes and dwarfs were never actually small people like the African pygmies believed in by Paracelsus. Some believe that it was just that they were lowly beings. Although extremely powerful in the sense of responsibility and skill, they were supposedly near the bottom of the supernatural hierarchy, so when referred to as small, it seems to relate to their social standing amongst the supernatural beings as compared to them being, small in stature, diminutive, as Bugs Bunny would say. So, realistically, these gnomes could be massive, and it'd make sense given the size of the doors that they're supposed to guard. Like, why would you get someone who's 5 inches tall to guard a door that's like the size of a 14-story building? It's mental. It wouldn't make sense unless they were super powerful. So, anyway, it gets weirder. Anyway, it does get weirder. If we stick with Disney for a moment, they had Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Now, dwarfs were in Norse mythology, Another thing in Norse mythology is the significance of the rainbow. Now, a rainbow is widely believed to have 7 colours, and this is where they get clever though in hiding the information from us. Perhaps the dwarfs in the cartoon represent the guardians between 7 of the Nordic worlds. Believed by many to have 9 worlds, though actually 7 of them are linked together, whilst what we know as Earth and the godly or the Watcher beings planet, known as gods, they live on Asgard, according to Norse mythology. What if they're not worlds though? What if they're just all different planes of existence, all connected except for Asgard and Midgard as they called Earth? Maybe we got disconnected, maybe we were never connected, but it's a striking coincidence that I think someone definitely needs to look into, and it definitely needed a mention, because they could use these 7 different colours to connect to these 7 different planes, but then need all 7 together to be able to connect Asgard to Midgard, for example. It's just a little something, but that's quite a lot to take in, so we'll have a song here. This is Logic and Mike Righteous's song, Was It All Worth It? Sticking with Norse mythology for a moment, the Rainbow Bridge, they used to call it the Bifrost. Now that allows them to travel from Asgard and visit Midgard. However, like I was saying a minute ago, what if each individual colour could be used independently to get to another world? Well, with the Bifrost being a bridge, we can tie something else into the history of the unknown. Trolls. Now, trolls were thought to reside under bridges, stopping people from passing when they shouldn't be passing, and trolls can turn into stone in direct sunlight, just like a gnome. But there are tales of gnomes turning into stone in direct sunlight too. They're supposedly nocturnal, like a troll. Trolls are also believed to be these big cumbersome monsters, whereas gnomes are seen as tiny, almost human-like creatures. What if someone in the past wanted to make people less scared of trolls, so they invented gnomes? To allow for more people to take the risk of travelling abroad. If everyone was scared to travel, then no one would be able to dominate the world, and you probably wouldn't have your package holidays and that, would you? So could the propaganda have started back then? Or was the propaganda against gnomes more recent, and their activities were assigned to murderous, terrifying trolls? What gnomes do, but we'll say that trolls do that instead. Trolls, though, is another word that's took on a new meaning. A troll on the internet is a mischievous person. And you know what's regularly described as mischievous? Fucking gnomes, mate. I'm going to say it again. What if we are the gnomes? What if there's been a huge psyops by a more powerful being that has manipulated us into believing we're not actually mythological dwarfs or gnomes at all, but we're in fact just this race called humans? It'd explain how people have managed to pass through mountains to other dimensions, because they've just remembered really that they're actually dwarven, and they've been able to do it all along. They just didn't know. That's in films, isn't it? The power was in you all along. It happens all the time. It's a trope thrown at us again and again, like they're teasing us with this little fucking drip feed of information, man, of the real world. It's mental. Anyway, it'd also make modern science and ancient historical beliefs align, but it could just be that everything has always remained the same, and the ruling class just changes the names of things, though, because they like to leave hints in it. Like I say, they leave this drip feed of information, and they only alter things slightly. It just so happens that naming things, though, that's got a name as well. Nomenclature, or nomenclature, Nomenclature, means naming things, innit? Nomenclature, I think it is. I ain't got a fucking clue. But either way, the name of that itself is suspect to me, mate. Especially when you compare it to, what the nomenclature is actually being used for in this sense. And it's being used for, the eradication of gnome in culture. Fucking... Those of you that can't see the video, I'm tapping the side of my forehead, mate. Just start thinking, innit? Think about it all. Now, earlier, when I mentioned mental diseases, I didn't really touch it. Some people used to believe that the race of dwarfs were to blame for mental diseases. Now, if if we're the actual dwarfs of mythology, then that would mean that modern science is correct too. Our own brains would be responsible for the ailments within our own minds. I've never really understood the reasons why people will believe a book written more recently that claims your mind is an iceberg with several different layers to it, and most of it's totally inaccessible to you. I don't get how that's more believable than saying the mythological gnomes caused the illness in your brain. I don't get why you can how you pick and choose, but how is it believable that there are chemicals and electricity within our brain that makes things happen in there? A few hundred years ago, electricity wasn't even really known about. You could say it didn't exist, or so we're told. So we never would have said it was the electricity in our brains that make us alive. We would have said it was the ghosts or the demons or God. We pretend that we know stuff, but we don't. We just assign whatever's in modern culture to facts or whatever's actually happening and go, oh yeah, that's explained by this, electricity. Electricity does it all. Mental. Now, I'm not saying, and if you're suffering with a mental illness or mental disease, this isn't, it's not a dig at you. I'm not saying it don't exist. I'm just suggesting that we still don't have a clue what they are. And because of the nature of science, and by that I mean how it has to build on previously acquired knowledge and also immediately accept the previous findings. The nature itself of science doesn't really allow for a true definition of anything to ever be found. Ever. For anything at all. The whole point of it is that new findings can always disprove previous findings, so that means nothing is ever true. Science is just that game that they make you play at school where each person writes a sentence on a piece of paper, folds it over, and then passes it on to the next person in the room. It's got to be read out at the end whether it makes sense or not, hasn't it? And that's all that science and history is, really. Electricity is one of the most prevailing things in the modern world. The English language might not be everywhere, but in some way or form, electricity is. Whether it's in a battery and a GPS, it's steaming through the pylons, to recharge all the bird drones, or firing from the sky to burn down rainforests. It's everywhere. We just call it electricity, and we use whatever that is to transfer or direct the information around the world. But what if we can do all of this anyway? What if electricity is the invisible wall that stops us from going down the alleyway of the supernatural in the game of life? We're all seeing loads of reports and research on the internet at the moment about applying something called quote-unquote forced helplessness, the concept that we can be worn down enough without any real efforts being made just to mess with us enough to make us believe that we're totally helpless, to stop us from trying to do better. Well, if you apply that same concept to the whole world, it's got to apply to the use of electricity as well. Electricity can be used to restart the pulmonary gland in the heart, or literally bringing people back to life, giving life. It can cause forest fires, like I say. But that in itself, that brings life and rejuvenation to the land. A forest needs a woods, needs to burn down in order to grow again and grow bigger and better. It's just all down to how it's perceived, isn't it? Electricity is currently used to alter perception through the means of technology. Technology that shows us alternative worlds, it shares news, it makes music, it shows us porn, as if it's being made out to look like it's important, like it's really important, but only for what it's deemed useful for. But what if in reality it can be used to do literally anything? What if that is what the life force of the universe is, and some mad cunts just decided to bottle it up? What if it's already there, just in the air, electricity, if it is the universal life force, if it's just around us, floating in the air, and it's able to do anything we want it to, but some clever fucker worked out that they can convince us that it's for something else entirely, so we'll never even think to use it for these other means of what would be considered supernatural. Only, they'll only ever show it you is it being something that's useful for a particular practice, rather than it being capable of doing literally anything. Like, why can certain chemicals stored in a metal sausage give out electricity? How does that make sense? Why aren't we all terrified by the fact that static shocks can be dished out just by
walking around fucking TK Maxx. We aren't scared because we know it's not going to hurt us. Only the mains electricity will hurt us. But why is that? Why will that hurt us? Is it because it's the life force of the universe being fed straight into us? A lot of people, when they die afterwards, they say their whole life flashed before their eyes, which, again, is misinformation, realistically, because these people are dead. So, where is this information coming from about it flashing before your eyes? How can we even know that electricity causes that to happen? Because if you're dead, you can't tell someone about this, innit? It almost feels wrong to say it is information at all. It's just outright lying. And lying seems like a pretty mischievous thing to do. And you know who's mischievous? Gnomes. So, it does all tie together. Now, I mean, they had the hats, they had the weird costumes. Were the Nazis actually gnomes? Or a group of different species of, multiple species of elves that banded together to destroy the world, or to try and wipe out the humans with the help of the Catholics? It's a possibility, innit? Or was the Catholics using them to do this? Was they really the puppeteers of it all? Maybe the idea from Scientology can come into play here, though. What if the soul-like life forces referred to in Scientology aren't actually from imprisoned intergalactic prisoners, though? What if they'd been previously imprisoned by whatever humans actually are, locked away in the seas and volcanoes? Because passing through the seas would be no trouble for the nymphs, and the volcanoes could be controlled by the salamanders of old. Not to mention, a volcano is literally just a doorway to the inner earth, and if the gnomes live under the ground, then they would need a door, potentially, or at least some way of getting in and out, even though they can pass through the ground. But why wouldn't they have an actual door? Not in the literal sense of hollow earth, though it could be, but unfortunately I'm not all that sure about it. I don't really know how the gnomes would link to hollow earth in that sense. If humans truly are a hybrid, though, developed by aliens using ape DNA, then why wouldn't the aliens put all their sentient or intelligent beings in some form of stasis? It'd be pointless to kill them all in case they somehow know the answer to a question that they didn't have the answer to. But these intelligent species could be super intelligent or proper deceiving, cunning little bastards. Like a cunning little gnome or a cunning little, elf. Troll. But these maybe on the off chance they could be versed in magic. But what would magic be? It seems impossible, but lots of people talk about how we live inside of a simulation, and if that's the case, then why wouldn't there be cheat codes? I mean, think about it. You shout fucking Bukan Jew at a wall and then you teleport into another country. How is that any different to typing the word motherload into the search bar on The Sims to get yourself 25 grand for free? Maybe that's why video games were invented, and sci-fi, a way of muddying the truth between the real world with magic and the world that someone wanted to curate around us. Now, I suppose we'll never know if the known world has been curated for nefarious ends, or if our own protection in any way, shape or form, but we don't even know who curated the world. We don't even know if the world was curated for nefarious ends or if it was curated for our own protection. Anyway, we don't know who curated it, full stop. Or who curated the world, or who devised modern history. But I know you, and you know me. And you know what? This show's supposed to be all about gnomes. So of course that was Bugsy Malone's King of the North. Now I'm going to be dead honest there, guys. That was supposed to be ABBA with Knowing Me, Knowing You, and I was going to change Knowing Me and Knowing You to Gnoming Me and Gnoming You. But I didn't think it'd really suit the stations. Anyway, the reason why I wanted to play a song by ABBA is because they're Scandinavian, and I think they're Scandinavian. I mean, is Swedish? Is Sweden Scandinavia? I don't know, but it's that area of Europe anyway, I think. So that means there's a good chance that the members of ABBA believed in the NICE, or the NIS, the NISSE, which
also there you got a double S in there from Europe. The Nazis were the Nazis were from Europe. They had a double S. Worthy gnomes. Anyway, the nice, which is the nice equate to the gnome in that area of the world. In fact, they're even recorded as more so looking like our garden gnomes of today. Now, when you look up the history of garden gnomes, it's all over the place, man. People assigning qualities to a fucking piece of dried painted clay, like it means something, you know. It's very difficult to pick out the truth, but some people say they're a good luck symbol, whereas historically others deem the gnomes as naughty and a hindrance. Farmers, apparently, used to believe that having a gnome in the barn, a fake gnome that is, it would protect their crops and even possibly allow for a bigger harvest that year. Now, I've been trying to work out why. What if there's a darker history to ceramic garden gnomes? We already know that if they're hit with direct sunlight, they get turned to stone. So how do we know that the leaders of the world, or the ceramicists of Central Europe, how do we know that they weren't farming gnomes? If they used electricity to imprison us within our own minds, how could you say that they didn't fathom a way to imprison the gnomes? They attract them all to a certain area using a frequency or even the mystical unknown use that electricity is naturally good for. Maybe it can be used to imprison living creatures. Farmers throughout the world may know about it, unable to teach us though, so they trap their sheep in fields, surrounding them with electric fences. Many people call humans sheep or sheeple, so it's not a huge jump to say that farmers are trying to tell us common folk that we are imprisoned by electricity. After all, if anyone would know of gnomes, it'd be a farmer, wouldn't it? They're attuned to nature, they work late nights and early mornings. It's a toss-up between farmers and prostitutes, really, innit? Maybe the odd dogger and all might have a story to tell you about the gnoming days, but I've found doggers tend to be quite a secretive bunch and pretty weird, so I imagine telling people that they saw a gnome appear from the ground wouldn't really be in their best interests. Then again though, I suppose people would expect a dogger to detail about the time they saw a little fella stand up in a forest, especially when they say it had a hat on with white hair poking out from underneath it. But, you know, they're a dogger. Fucking hell. Anyway, the ceramic gnomes, yeah. Ceramic gnomes. What if there's a class of people out there hiding in the shadows, like figuratively, not literally? They're not gnomes, you know, they're not hiding in the actual shadows. What if these creepy people, though, what if they've imprisoned the gnomes? They're small, so we can assume if they breed, it must be in litters, like rats or mice. Though there's very little out there about female gnomes or even female dwarfs. Now, to be fair, you could argue Smurfs are a bit like gnomes, and I think they had Smurfette, and we've all heard that song where Smurfette's asking Papa Smurf if she can lick his arse. So it's fair to assume that the female dwarfs are slutty, but there's very little written about them, very, very little. And I think is it Gargamon? Is that the name of the guy in the Smurfs, the evil guy? He probably does want to shag that miniature Smurf as well, and you know, power to him. But I hope that the Smurfette is into it. I hope she wants to take part. You know, it might be terrifying for her to have the cat there watching as well, because I imagine the cat would want to eat the Smurf. But if she plays her cards right, Gargamon could be eating her for the night. Who knows? But anyway, getting back to the breeding gnomes, could it be that gnomes breed like colony-forming insects though, like bees and ants? Is that why there was only Smurfette in the Smurfs? Was Smurfette Queen Smurf? Like the queen bee of Smurfs, the queen ant, you know, the could there be some oversized BBG, you know, that's big beautiful gnomes living deep underground or in an artificially induced dark environment on a European farm somewhere in Europe? It's hard to pin it down, I guess, but is this big mother gnome, the OG, the original gnome herself, pumping out gnome egg after gnome egg? Though I believe that the earth-dwelling pygmy races like dwarfs and gnomes would more than likely be live bearers like cats or humans rather than being formed in eggs. Though if they were formed in eggs, it would explain why they're always seen with tools.
Now, maybe we farm the gnomes and they're born with tools attached to their hands, in the same way that when you hatch out a chicken or a duck's a better example. So when you hatch out a duckling, the ducks, as you know, have a rounded bill, don't they? But a duckling itself will have a little point on the end of that bill there so it can crack through the egg. What if gnomes are born with these limbs that look like pickaxes? Or we paint them to look like pickaxes, but in reality it's just a fucking weird finger that they have to break through this rock hard egg. But, you know, when the tools, you know, it gets them out of the egg, but it's... I mean, what if it's more metaphorical though? After all, these gnomes can pass through any physical surface without issue, so why would they struggle to get through an egg? Do you know what I mean? What if we're the gnomes? Or we're the spirit of the gnomes, disembodied from the rock-hard bodies of the gnomes that have been collected by the gnome collector? Maybe we've had our souls extracted, and our bodies then naturally turn to stone or earth. Maybe the collector doesn't do it at all. You know, as it was known in the past, like they knew they turned to stone. But when what I mean is when Paracelsus, whatever the guy's name was, that guy that was talking about at the start of the show, the philosopher from the Swiss philosopher. What if when he says they're of earth, he just means of stone? He doesn't mean of. He just means they turn to stone. Because you could argue that every animal turns to stone and is of stone, and then other bits of you evaporate, don't they, and turn to gas or water or whatever. Or if that's all he meant by that, it's a bit hard to, you know, put into words really all of this. I'm if you've stuck with the episode this long, guys, well done. But it just gets more confusing as you look more deeper into it. Now, going back to these eggshells, the so-called shell, if it's metaphorical, the shell could be the day-to-day tribulations of human life. The tools such as pickaxes and spades, they're symbolic of like people skills or talents, you know. Whilst the lanterns that a lot of gnomes seem to be holding, they could be there to represent us finding the light or enlightenment, or using the light to find our way back to our gnome bodies. It could be true, but metaphors just make things a bit more complicated, and why would they give us so many hints on how to return to our gnomish roots? They just wouldn't, innit? Like, why would they? It's more likely that the tools are added as an afterthought to make the gnomes look more cartoony. But it could also be to try and belittle the gnome. Like the real gnomes see these gnomes being held with tools and stuff, and the real gnomes are like, we don't need tools, we can just do it with our minds, mate. You can do it with your minds. Why are you using your mind to make a pickaxe, to put your back out, to chop the floor up? Just look at the floor and chop it up with your brain. But I don't know. It's hard to get your head around, isn't it? It's hard to assume, really. But could it be this we're from tormenting the gnomes? Are we tormenting the gnomes when we give them pickaxes and that, you know? And is it this playful nature when dealing with the corpses of supernatural beings that causes bumper crops for farmers and protects people's gardens? Is that the reason? Is it because we're messing around with gnomes' dead bodies? Because obviously the gnomes would live in fear of us if we were doing this to them. The wild gnomes would see the still, lifeless bodies of their brethren being hoarded by old, frail women, making them seem stronger than what they are. Is it a way of making old women seem beefy? You know, making them seem like they could take you in a fight? Well, making them seem... Is it a way to make fairies and pixies and gnomes think old women could beat them in a fight? Whereas in reality, we all know that a gnome could easily beat up a grandma. The other supernatural beings stay away when they see the stone-encased gnomes in the gardens because they don't want the humans knowing that they exist. I can't imagine pixies or fairies would want to end up as like plaster-sized Christmas tree decorations, though there are many traditions of putting the tip of a Christmas tree up a fairy's arsehole, which is again nothing but degrading to the fairies. Maybe that's why Father Christmas gives free gifts to people. It's in the hope that we don't discover his elves, or maybe Santa is the most evil of them all. He's kind of European.
he has an enslaved race of small people called elves. Maybe he just is really grateful that the humans haven't discovered how immensely powerful the earthbound race of interdimensional elemental creatures that they are truly are. So he throws wooden trains at kids in the hopes that they'll ignore the gnomes. Though a lot of people assign the elemental creatures that Paracelsus wrote about as living in wooded areas and forests, even in the mountainous areas. And as I say, St. Nicholas is always depicted as providing wooden toys. So what if Santa himself is actually fighting a war against the other supernatural beings? Like, Santa's a big guy as well, with long white hair and all normally. You know what else has those features? Tall whites, fucking Nordic aliens. Perhaps the Venetian race of aliens, from Venice, like Val Valiant Thor and his guys, Maybe they got the name Nordic because they first landed or appeared in that area of Europe. They discovered all of these other supernatural beings and decided that rather than maintaining the balance of our world, they would instead try to tip the scales in their favour by enslaving or farming these different races. Because many would argue we're enslaved, so why do we stop at the aliens have enslaved us? Why don't we think the aliens have enslaved the pixies, the trolls, the ogres, the fucking ghosts and everything else, Or just maybe they didn't enslave us or farm the the fucking supernatural beings. Maybe they just rewrote all of human history to completely disregard them all. Anyway, as you can tell by my stutterings, I'm getting a bit wound up here and I've lost myself on my script, so we'll have a song. This is another song that I've played a few from this album now, I think, so far, and this is off his EP that he released recently. It's off Classified's new EP, and it's Pills and Blankets. Well, I suppose you're wondering, how did you get to Santa? How do aliens fit into all of this? How did you have the nerve to say this episode was going to be all about gnomes? Well, I don't know what you actually want to know because unfortunately this is a pre-recorded show, but here's this week's Here's How. Guys, I think that's probably going to be around about the end of the show. You've been listening to Pause for Thought. I'm the world around you, and this is Threshold FM.
To play us out, it's just a little bit of Zion I with Takeover. You alright, guys? I'm the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM. This week's a bit of a challenge for me. I can't remember who it was, but someone at some point has suggested that I look into a fella called Henry Avery, or Henry Every. I've never heard of him. So I thought, fuck it, I'll give it a go, try and figure out who he is, have a look into him. He must be interesting if someone's gone out of the way to get in touch about him and say, you should do an episode on this guy. But the name, immediately in your head, like, what does Henry Avery, as a name, what springs to mind? Like, for me, it builds an image in my head of, like, of a bloke around in, like, the 1600s, because it just sounds like that sort of a name. Feathery hats, like a fancy dress pimp, maybe a sword fight, But, maybe not. I don't know. At this point where I'm saying this was what my initial interpretations of the name was before I looked into it. I thought it might, be nice because I don't know who he is. Make a little note on him and that straight away. And then I thought I'd come back and write me notes and that. But, so, he sounds posh, innit? He does sound posh with a name like Henry Avery. I mean, saying anything like that probably sounds posh. Does in my head anyway, but maybe not to use in my accent. Anyway, I looked into him a little, and it turns out I got a couple of those little bits right there, which is making me think I must have had an idea about him in the back of my head somewhere. Maybe when whoever it was who mentioned him, maybe I had a little quick look at him. Fuck knows. But Henry Avery, he was an English pirate. To many, I suppose he was the epitome of the English pirate, knocking about on the Atlantic and Indian Oceans in the late 1600s. This guy had eventually led an army of 440-ish pirates and performed the largest pirate heist in history. Apparently he was born near Plymouth in the southwest of England, and this bloke's parents and background were quite low in the socio-economic ladder. Like modern day times, you'd be considered working class or lower middle class. But some other sources I found seem to say that his family were related to the owners of Wycroft Castle, so maybe he was aristocracy in one way or another. Maybe he was just a distant relative. Maybe my sources aren't all that reliable, like, not going off my past episodes, I don't think they really are.
Originally, he was in the British Navy, and he'd work on boats for most of his life. Easily, the most important ship he was ever stationed on was the Charles II, which, when he was on it, was destined for Spain, but due to some alleged clerical error, it would eventually lead him to mutiny against its captain and earn the title of captain for himself, even going on to become the king. Now, piracy itself is something that seems to be a very old trade, and it's evolved over the years. In the 17th century, it seemed to be a way for countries to terrorise one another without having to claim it was them directly. In the 90s, it was fat bearded blokes renting copies of Robin Williams films on VHS out of the back of a Volkswagen on my old council estate. He used to come around on a Friday evening, you've just had your chippy, you hear the horn go, everyone's doors open and close, and everyone runs out to this estate, the car. Look at a big boot, trunk if you're in America, I guess. And then it'd just be like, well, what do you want to rent for the weekend or for the week? You give him a couple of quid and he'd let you have a fucking copy of a film for a few days. That was piracy in the 90s anyway, but now in 2020 it's returned back to its roots, innit? It's come full circle and we've now got pirates back in the seas once again, but instead of just robbing trade routes, they can also now kidnap, murder, steal, and do all of this aboard intercontinental cruise ships, ruining the holidays and wetting the trousers of middle class families the world over. Anyway, let's have a song. This is a new song. This is Texas and Wu-Tang with High. It's hard to decide if Henry Avery actually existed. As a pirate, he made waves for the Spanish, the French, and he even turned on his fellow Englishmen and that, innit? But it seems even as a pirate leader, well, as I said a minute ago, he was dubbed the Pirate King. He seemed to be quite a kind leader. He wouldn't just butcher the captains of ships he commandeered. He'd often allow them to leave and send them and any other surviving ship workers who didn't want to become pirates. He'd let them all go to shore. Not ensuring the survival as such, but at least he didn't enslave them or just kill them there and then just to throw his weight around and that, innit, playing Billy Big Bollocks. Unfortunately though, he didn't show that same graciousness to African people. Of course, during this time the slave trade was fucking roaring, but did you know that the RAC, obviously, not the fucking breakdown service in the UK, but back then RAC stood for Royal African Company, that seemed to hold a monopoly over the Atlantic slave trade. And you had to possess a licence from them in order to be a legitimate slave trader. Now, true to his relatively new pirate nature, though Henry weren't really, he wasn't going to try and play by anyone's rules because he'd just become a pirate. There are stories of him not only taking Africans as slaves without a licence, but also taking slavers as slaves as well. And although it's obviously not a good thing to be doing, it is kind of remarkable, isn't it, how he just seemed to want to say fuck you to everyone and everyone's rules, which is mad. It's almost like he was just told to stir the pot, and whilst I can't find anything that seems to be solid evidence of this, at least not in a few hours worth of reading on the internet, I have found a quote that claims Avery, along with Blackbeard, Edward Teach, I think was his real name, but obviously more people, I've only ever heard of Blackbeard, I had to look up his name to find Edward Teach. But apparently them pair were officially supported in the reigns of transatlantic terror by the American colonies, or the colonies that were colonising America at the time, the English, the Spanish. They were sort of in cahoots with the pirates, it seems. And it's mad because you don't even, when you think of America back then, America wasn't like a solid collective that was already properly formed in the mid 1600s. And it's mad to think that it was managing to perform these nefarious tasks with people deemed criminals, even then. Just like all the rumours that circulate on the internet about how they currently have dealings with South American countries and Middle Eastern nations. It's fucking mad, mate. Sticking with pirates though, in one of my favourite books, An Underground Education by Richard Zasks, as Captain Kidd there was a captain, a pirate captain, it turned out, called Captain Kidd. And his real name was William Kidd, and he was alive around the same time as Henry Morgan and as Henry Avery, Henry Morgan being another pirate at the time. And before I go into him, it's worth saying now that Henry Avery may or may have not been Henry Avery's name. There are records of Henry using an A and the need to start the spelling of Avery. Also, he was known as Jack Avery, John Every, Benjamin Bridgman, which is one of the better names he had. Long Ben as well, which is probably what I assume he was using in bars and that, to try and chat birds up. But these are the aliases that I can find, innit? Like, I imagine there was a lot more. Like, he's only going to have been caught with a few. Why would he keep using the same names all over the place? Unless I suppose it's for his reputation. But I guess you'd recognise the boat, innit? Because apparently the boat looked quite nice, which is what led to the boat being called the Fancy once they'd taken it over. But if you can cast your mind all the way back to maybe episode 4, maybe episode 5, when I covered Adam Worth, he also had a lot of aliases, and again, we can only be sure of a few of them. It would appear that Henry was a very persuasive and intelligent man. Otherwise, he'd never been able to have been elected captain of his ship when the mutiny occurred. He also wouldn't have become like the pirate king and that, innit? So, what if Henry Avery was only a pirate for 2 years, because he was also a pirate named William Kidd at the same time, and he was also a pirate known to some as Henry Morgan. Both notorious pirates in the late 17th century, but what if he wasn't a single man, though? What if it was a collective? What if none of them ever existed, though? Like, none of these people, as actually these characters, ever existed. Maybe they've just been added to history retrospectively to try and blur the lines between the perpetrators of what seemed to be literal war crimes and the countries that were performing them. Anyway, let's have another song. This is Atmosphere with the Sunshine. Cheeky little advert about halfway through, Did you know that I've got a red bubble and all that, where you can buy yourself little stickers for your laptop or your skateboard or something, or shirts as well? Even if you felt, especially weird, you could get a shower curtain with my face on it about 150 times. Obviously, I know no one wants that, but you got to have something different to offer, haven't you, that other people haven't got. Anyway, let's crack on with the show. Pirates in the 1600s seem to be something that actually brought countries together, as weird as it sounds. Much like World War One did, though. Like, World War One brought countries together. It brought the people within the countries together, and then it brought different countries all together. World War Two did the same thing, and all, realistically. The War on Terror's done it as well. You might not want to admit it, but it did. Could pirates have been the invisible enemy of the 17th century? Pirate Henry Morgan, as I mentioned, was pretty much allowed to be a criminal of the seas, except in February 1971, I think it was. He seemed to piss off the English and the Spanish by raiding Panama City. This is because in July 1670, the English and the Spanish Empire signed a treaty called the Treaty of Madrid, and this was the first time that the Spanish was seen to allow the English to possess any colonies in the Caribbean whatsoever. But instead of being hung for what he did, or drowned, or quartered, or burnt alive like a witch would have been, as a show of goodwill to the Spanish, the English brought Henry Morgan home and knighted him. And King Charles II, the actual king, obviously not the boat, named him the Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica, which, to be honest, seems like a massive fuck you to Spain. Almost like the English forces had used this pirate to their advantage, except instead of vilifying him like they would nowadays, or suiciding him with like a belt and a tangerine and a pile of pornographic etchings, they treated him like royalty, which is fucking weird, isn't it? It's weird how potentially there's it's not synonymous, that wouldn't be the word, innit? But there's sort of reflections. Would you say it mirrors modern society in a way? And there's proof that warring nations would set pirates against enemy merchant ships as well. And instead of paying the pirates for the trouble, they would actually have the pirates divvy up the takings amongst themselves and the country that hired them under the table. So not only did you have to go out as a pirate and fuck over another boat and rob all the money and the gear, then you had to bring it back, and without sort of being caught bringing all this stolen stuff back, then divvy it up with the people that had hired you who hadn't actually hired you on paper. If we're to believe recent mirrors of modern society like Grand Theft Auto 5, then rich people are still using mercenaries to this day. But back in the 1600s, these mercenaries weren't committing corporate espionage. They were boarding and plundering the pay's ships. One of these rich guys was called Richard Livingston, who worked with the king's cousin to hire a pirate that I've already mentioned. Now, when I say hired, I mean it kind of loosely. Like they weren't given a direct order as such, more like they were allowed free reign of the oceans to just be a cunt to everyone around them. Captain Kidd, the aforementioned pirate, the watery Billy the Kid, if you like, But there was nothing wet about him. You're like, don't be thinking that. Don't be thinking because I'm saying the Watery Billy the Kid that he was a bit of a wet guy. He wasn't. He was fucking, by all accounts, he seemed to be fucking hard as nails. He was described historically as an easily angered Scottish bloke who fought against France for the British in battles that took place in the West Indies, which is fucking, to me, that now, like nowadays, that's fucking weird, isn't it? That the idea that two countries that are exactly like next to each other, directly next to each other, with just a little fucking stream in between, realistically, in the great fucking aspect of the world, that they were fighting in each other, but in the West Indies. Anyway, by the time of his commission from the rich guys, he was already pretty wealthy though, Billy the Kid. Well, Captain Kidd, I don't want to confuse him with any cowboys and that. He was already pretty wealthy at the time, so I don't get why he did it. It's almost like he must have been coerced, like and he just went back out to sea when they told him to. Like, except for this time though, he wasn't fighting in a war as such, like he wasn't going to be fighting the French for the English or fighting the English for the French. Nor was he really starting a war either. He just seems to have been given carte blanche. Like, his orders were to attack any merchant ships he sees. But his newfound freedom, if you could call it that, like that, I don't know if you would call it freedom, innit? Because I really doubt he had a choice. As I say, it sounds more like an offer he couldn't refuse. And lucky, like, for the continuity of this show. Continuity sounds better, doesn't it? That's got to be the fucking word. Continuity of the show. Which, ironically, has fucking ruined the continuity of the show, realistically, the flow of the show. But either way, I mean, good for the next 45 minutes anyway. Like, he didn't say no to it. He went and did it, because it gives me an extra, the next sort of 5 minutes. Anyway, his commission allowed Billy Big Bollocks to attack pirates of all the nationalities that he wanted. Like, he didn't have to be like, oh, I can't attack them because they've got a certain flag or their boat's painted like this or they've given us a certain hand signal, as we've gone past. He could do whatever he wanted to anyone he wanted. And he could keep anything at all that he plundered. He didn't need to share his winnings with his bosses like other pirates had to. There was no kick up to the guy paying his wages, which sounds too good to be true realistically, doesn't it? Like, if you're told if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And it's almost like they knew if they offered him these sort of parameters for his job, if you want to use quote-unquote job, that he wouldn't say no, and maybe he wouldn't be able to stop himself as well. Maybe he was a sociopath or a psychopath. Like, he must have been fucking mental if he was like, oh, I've got a good life here, I think he had a wife and kids, and he's like, oh, I've got businesses, because he was a businessman as well, like a legitimate business owner, and he still went, you know what, fuck it, I'd love to go and fucking attack some people on boats. I've not done it for a couple of years, it fucking remind me of the good times. Anyway, he died like 5 years after receiving the job, so he must have been good at what he was doing, at least for a while, I imagine it's a hard life at sea as well, because obviously scurvy was an issue, because they didn't have fruit and veg, because it wouldn't really last. But not just that, the fact that pirates were fucking knocking about trying to kill everyone, and that you're one of them. Even as a pirate, it must have been hard. It must have been hard as a pirate, because you've got no protection whatsoever from pirates, from other fucking countries, from everyone. No one's protecting the pirates. There's fucking raping, taking slaves, murdering people, kidnapping others. It's just a fucking horrible way to live. Like, imagine the stress. Plus, you've got stories of, like, fucking colossal squids, like the Kraken, and other weird stories of weird sea monsters and stuff, and weird storm activity, and storms, just normal storms at sea. Fucking hell, it's like, go on YouTube and look at a fucking video of a storm at sea. Like, some of the waves are, like, bigger than, like, the Empire State Building, mate. It's mental. And these people are like, oh, it's all worth it for a fucking couple handfuls of gold. Imagine killing everyone except for the person on a ship as well, like thinking it'll send the right message, or we'll leave him alive and we'll send him off on his way to shore because he'll go and tell everyone how much of a cunt I was and people will stay clear of us. But instead, like, that survivor just decides to dedicate his life to revenge and comes back with like a French, Spanish, or even like a fucking Persian fleet. You'd be fucked, mate. You would. You've been pissing everyone off for your own selfish gain, and you've even turned on your own as well. So that's another group that had joined the Survivor in, like, the fucking... Like, I'm imagining this as, like, it'd be like the end of season finale. Like, they pissed off him in, like, episode 2, and he's like, oh, I'll be back, you little fucker. And he goes off, and you see little cutaways through the series of him chatting in French, then you see him chatting in Spanish, and then in Portuguese, and then he's in England, and and then at the end of towards halfway through the end of the last episode, there's a little cliffhanger starts building. You see all these boats of all different colours working together to come towards the pirate, which is kind of what I was trying to say before, how it would bring countries together. But I'll get back into, rather than just imagining a TV series that probably won't ever exist. It wasn't just the misanthropic king's cousin, though, Bobby Livingston, that funded the misadventure, that fucking Captain Kidd under the Tuck. There was 4 unnamed British guys as well that were reportedly 4 of the most powerful people in the British Isles at the time, and they threw $6,000 his way to get the ship kitted out, which I imagine, after doing a fair bit of reading yesterday on pirates and that, one of the reasons he did this was because there was stories circulating in the late 1600s about Henry Avery's ship, which was now called the Fancy rather than Charles II, and because that had been stripped and it had been deemed to be one of the fastest ships in the ocean. I think it was in the Atlantic Ocean. After some time passed, though, these 4 businessmen did come out of the woodwork and revealed themselves. There was, get your fingers ready for this, 4 businessmen. Within these 4 businessmen, obviously they're all posh, there was 2 earls, the Duke of Shrewsbury, 2 secretaries of state, the First Lord of Admiralty, so they're already there. I think we're at 6 there, aren't we? That 4 has already become 6. And I don't even think that's from a mistake, mate. That's not even like a historical mistake, like someone's just counted wrong about it. It can't be. I imagine they just roped other people into it to protect themselves. They even included the king, so that's 7 people. And they gave the king a 10% cut of all takings before anyone else got a cut. It was a completely legal, legitimate enterprise to be undertaken at the time. But for some reason, it still comes across as they were still covering their backs, protecting themselves. But I guess if you include someone high up in the country's navy, though, and the leader of the country, that means that they're going to want to, either way, they're going to want to protect their investments. So it's pretty clever. And they've got the manpower to throw at it, the technology to throw at it, the people who in the know information, mate, just by including them and saying, we'll give you 10%, and then he won't get 10% of anything if it all goes to shit, so he's going to want to put in a bit of work. He'll think to himself, well, I'll put in 10% worth of the profits from it, you know what I mean? Say it's cost $6,000 in total, I'll give you 600 quid's worth of information, and I want, obviously I want fucking more back, because it was obviously being a pirate, or funding a pirate was probably more profitable than being a pirate itself, because as a pirate, you're putting your fucking life on the line for realistically next to nothing. Why are you doing it, really? You're not defending anything. You're not standing up for anything. You're literally just doing it for the money. Whereas the people that have paid you, they're doing nothing but being rich and becoming richer, and then obviously from that becoming more powerful and more influential. Anyway, I want to get back into Henry Avery, because that's who I wanted to focus on. So I'm going to leave the story of Captain Kidd here for now. I might come back to him in a few weeks or something, but to cut a long story short, for now, the same Admiralty, I don't know, I've only ever seen this word written down, I think he was the lead admiral of the British fleet. What he did was, even though he was involved in all this and funded him and everything, allegedly, he then discreetly, discreetly funded him, but then openly fucking hung him. Literally fucking hung him. Took the rope round his neck and fucking killed the cunt. But between him taking the job on and getting killed, I reckon that'd be a fucking good film, that story. And I might cover that in an episode. I want to try and do an episode where I sort of take historical facts and try and make it into a story, so it's to try and see if I can write stories. Might be boring as fuck to you when you're listening to it, thinking, my God, this guy's never read a proper book. You can tell he only reads fucking facts. But anyway, fucking, this is going to nothing. Let's have a song. This is Low Key's new song. This is Baby Steps. Alright, sticking with me Grand Theft Auto 5, my GTA 5 reference. King of the Pirates, Henry Avery. He was a lot like Michael in the sense that he seemed to just want that one big score. And on his way to that, he worked up to it. So we touched on his slave trader dealings before, but that was just like a one stop on his mission, on his fucking campaign of terror. Whether or not he'd planned it to pull off the biggest score of pirating history eludes me. Like, I can't find... There isn't much record, because they're fucking pirates, mate, really. Like, they were bad people, and they were good at being bad people, so they covered the tracks. There's no real history to them, only really what seems to be folklore and anecdotal evidence, and maybe the odd journal and that. Like, I did find a bit of evidence from a historian, which I'll go into later. It wouldn't fit in now, it wouldn't make any sense in it, but... Like, I don't know if he'd planned it, like I say, like, fuck knows. It'd be kind of cool if he did, and he's got there with a map and a compass, and he's like, fucking hell, right, we'll stop off here, and we'll catch a couple slaves, and then we'll go over here, and we'll raid these merchants here, and we'll recruit more staff, which is what he did. He'd fucking rob a ship, be like, give us all your shit, give us your money, give us your food, give us your gun, give us your muskets, give us your cannons, give us your swords, and then he'd be like, right, do you want to work for me? And I'll give you more money than you could ever fucking imagine. And of course, a lot of them just went, yeah, fuck it. You've just burnt my ship, otherwise I'm just going to be stuck here and die. I would like to get home to me wife. Anyway, like, it don't really matter, innit? Like, if he planned to do it or not, because he still did it. Which is, like, that's a little lesson in life for people, realistically, innit? Like, if you don't plan too much, if something's going to happen, it'll happen anyway. This guy went on to be one of the fucking... to be the pirate king. Like, I don't think there's been any others. Obviously, in Archer, he's the pirate king, but other than that, that's a fucking cartoon. This is fucking fact. Well, I say fact, loosely fact. I may have misunderstood a lot of this. Like, speaking of things I've misunderstood anyway, like, other things that I bet that Henry Avery, Long Ben, Benjamin Bridgman, whatever his fucking name were, I bet he didn't plan his little ties to other alternative history and conspiracy lore, or did he? Like, one of his ships he worked on was named the Seventh Son, which gives the story of Henry Avery, like, it gives him ties to, well, loose ties, like, very fucking on by a thread, very fucking tenuous ties, but still a connection nonetheless to the occult. Occultists believe that a seventh son has the potential to have magical powers, and Henry did seem to possess the powers of persuasion. Now, I don't know if that's the same as being truly magical with a K, but it does seem he would impose his will on others, which seems to have something to do with magic, and we learned that in the Savile bits, that when I looked into Jimmy Savile, that was a bit to do with the magic that he supposedly was into, to impose your will on others. And if he was able to persuade all these different people to join his cause, and what he fucking eventually ended up doing, I mean, perhaps, you know, like, most surprisingly, one of his ties is to September 11th. Now, he didn't use a boat to destroy an old-timey oceanic fucking oil derrick or anything like that, but he was directly affecting world trade, which I guess is a link. But the date itself was actually his wedding anniversary, which, you know, is nice to know that his wedding anniversary was celebrated and documented, supposedly, to his wife Dorothy Arthur. But then you've got loads of historians that are saying, oh, he might not have actually been married to Dottie, you know, that might have not been real. So, fuck knows. You know, we don't know for sure if his actual wife was you know, Dorothy. You know, we don't know if he even did get married. But according to what I've found, some people at least believe he did get married to a woman named Dorothy Arthur on September the 11th, which, you know, pretty... I mean, it's got nothing to do with the World Trade Center, but it's a little link, you know, it's a little something. And if you really want to stretch it even fucking thinner, there was a pope around that time in the 1600s and 1700s that would sort of hire pirates. He had a major predilection towards him, and he'd used them to his advantage of the church. Now, I'm unsure if Mr. Avery was one of the pirates signed off on by the Pope, but I'm pretty sure Henry Morgan was. Like, not 100% sure, but pretty sure. And if Henry Morgan was Henry Avery, then maybe he was tied to the Pope at the time. Getting back into the story of Long Ben, a.k.a. Henry Avery, I can't help but wonder if he's an accidental symbol. Like, have you ever considered that there may be societies that have one name but many faces? That'd allow 5 or 6 people to be the same person, innit? Now, maybe this was one of the early attempts at this, or maybe it's what led to that form of society being made. We've already learned that insanely rich, influential people lie about their names, and even about the amount of people that they actually are. You'll remember how 4 became 6 plus a king. So who's to say that they didn't initially think if we have 6 people all doing the same job title that it would work? Then they realised it'd be better to have 6 people use the same name to do different jobs, because that creates a legend. It creates fear, notoriety. Maybe Henry Avery was one of these pirate kings, possibly even the most effective or vocal of the several pirate kings that may have existed. Kind of like a ghostwriter. They say, so and so wrote the song, innit? But in reality, it was written by 2 or 3 different people in 6 different parts from initially 10 different songs, all just cobbled together by people who can't even sing. Anyway, however many people Avery was, his first achievement as a pirate captain was near Cape Verde, where he robbed 3 English merchant ships, which got him more than just weapons and money. It got him more followers. King Bridgman was living up to his name. Avery in the sense that he was capturing future jailbirds and building bridges amongst like-minded criminals. After a job on the Guinea coast where they captured a chieftain and enslaved them, they then travelled to a maritime chop shop and shed some weight from the Charles II, almost as if to make it really feel like their own ship. The Fancy, as I said before, they called it the Fancy. But these changes meant that the ship was now one of the fastest in the Atlantic Ocean at the time. A great thing if you're working alone, but maybe not if you're working in a team. Although I guess if all of the ships are arriving from different directions at different times at different speeds, that means you can stagger a fight, and that could possibly turn the battle into a battle of attrition rather than a simple round of oldie-worldy fisticuffs. Then they were on the way to their big job now. So somewhere or another they'd heard of this shipment, a convoy that was headed for Mecca. Whether it's because the Mughal Empire, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Mughal, Mughal, I'm going to go Mughal, or Mughal, because it kind, I don't know, it's that GH in the middle, I don't know how you would pronounce that. Mughal Empire would repeat the journey every year anyway, every single year. Obviously it's a pilgrimage, innit? So either they found out about it because they knew it happened every year, because he'd been about in the waters, in the seas for most of his life, or maybe someone was talking about it. Either way, Avery had managed to muster a fleet of 6 ships, of which he got deemed admiral of the fleet, and they set off to steal from these vessels that were on the pilgrimage. At this point in time now, this is where he had the 440 pirates, and these were split amongst 6 ships, so attempting to take on a 25-ship strong convoy of soldiers and civilians, it was a risky move. But I guess they'd never expect it. Now, you wouldn't think, them 6 ships, they're really going to cause us a bit of aggro, are they? That's going to be a bit of mither for us there. And as it turns out, it did surprise them. And something that will surprise the social justice warriors of social media is that this was an Asian empire that they were attacking, not an empire of white people. Obviously, it's not the only empire that has existed that wasn't white people, and I don't seem to. It does seem to just be the American social justice warriors that you see online ranting and raving about stuff like this.